Chapter 1239. Although Assistant Lu had a girlfriend, she still blushed in the face of such a beautiful woman. The next second, he received a warning look from his boss. Assistant Lu, Fang Yuhan was unhappy. Hearing Assistant Lu's nagging to express her care for Shirley, Su Yuning looked at Assistant Lu with a much softer look. If he didn't know that Assistant Lu couldn't know Shirley's real identity, he would have jumped up and scolded her. Fang Yuhan felt that Assistant Lu was unnecessary here. He glanced at Assistant Lu and said, "If I remember correctly, you said that you would have a candlelight dinner with your girlfriend tonight." Assistant Lu paused for a moment. Yes, he had planned to have a romantic candlelight dinner with his girlfriend tonight, and then he would have a more beautiful night by the way. However, the boss called him and asked him to come over. Assistant Lu wasn't sure if he could make it back in time. He had already sent a text message to his girlfriend to apologize. She hadn't replied to him until now. Obviously, she was a little angry. Hearing the boss's words, Assistant Lu thought for a while and suddenly understood what the boss meant. Since Shirley was fine, and the boss had brought such a beautiful woman home, wasn't it unnecessary for him to stay here? He raised his hand and looked at his watch. It was 4:00 in the afternoon. He could still make it. Assistant Lu was instantly full of energy and said to Fang Yuhan, "Boss, since Princess Shirley is fine, I'm relieved. I have to go back to the company to sort out some documents. I can't stay here any longer." As soon as he finished speaking, he received a look of approval from his boss. Fang Yuhan said slowly, "For a diligent employee like Assistant Lu, her year-end bonus should be increased." Assistant Lu was overjoyed. Without further delay, he got up and left. Once again, only Gu Xingyin and Fang Yuhan were left in the room. Fang Yuhan slowly leaned forward and looked at Gu Xingyin without blinking. "Alright, now that it's quiet and no one is disturbing us, can you explain it to me?" "Surely." Finally, he came. Gu Xingyin breathed a sigh of relief. If Fang Yuhan hadn't asked her, she would have been worried. In fact, ever since she got into the car, she had been thinking about how to break the news to Fang Yuhan. Along the way, she had already made her decision. Gu Xingyin turned to look at Fang Yuhan. Just as she was about to speak, Fang Yuhan spoke first. "I hope you can tell me the truth, Shueli." Gu Xingyin smiled. "I never intended to hide it from you." She began to say that she was a spiritual beast. Her first memory was when she came to this world and was brought back by Fang Yuhan, bit by bit. Other than the final outcome of the spiritual beast, she had told Fang Yuhan everything. However, Fang Yuhan frowned. His intuition told him that Shirley wasn't lying to him. But she was definitely hiding something from him. Intuition was a very mysterious thing. However, both times, his intuition about Shirley had been surprisingly accurate, so Fang Yuhan had no choice but to believe it. He looked at Gu Xingyin, who was sitting opposite him on the sofa, indicating that she had said everything. He said with certainty, "You're still hiding something from me." "Gu Xingyin, how did you know?" She quickly asked the system. Did Fang Yuhan also cheat? Chapter 1240. The system gave a definite negative answer. How could he be so sure? Gu Xingyin looked up and met Fang Yuhan's burning gaze. She sighed and said, "Yes, there's one more thing that I haven't told you." Fang Yuhan listened attentively. Gu Xingyin said, "I can only stay in this world for 3 years. Now, 1 year has passed." Fang Yuhan's body trembled. He said in a hoarse voice, "What do you mean you can only stay for 3 years?" Gu Xingyin shook her head. "I don't know. This is what my inherited memory tells me. I'm a creature that doesn't belong to this world." When she said this, she had secretly changed the concept. After all, if one followed her words and thought about it, most people would only think that she might return to her original world in 3 years. She would not die. However, even if she did not die, Fang Yuhan felt that he could not accept the fact that she could only stay by his side for 2 more years. He was silent for a while and said, "Is there no room for negotiation?" Gu Xingyin thought for a while and said, "No." Suppressing the dragon vein was not an easy task. After she exhausted her spiritual power and cultivation, her chances of survival were almost 0. Fang Yuhan did not say anything. The atmosphere in the room was obviously dull. After a long time, just when Gu Xingyin felt that she was about to fall asleep, Fang Yuhan suddenly moved. He got up and walked to Gu Xingyin's side. "Shirley." He bent down and called her. Gu Xingyin looked up at him in confusion. The next moment, her lips were covered by something warm. It was a light kiss. Gu Xingyin looked up at him in shock. "What are you doing?" Fang Yuhan looked at her warmly. "I just thought about it. Since I only have 2 years, I should make good use of it and not leave any regrets in my life." He bent down and supported the sofa behind Gu Xingyin with his hand. "Shirley. Are you willing to date me?" Enveloped by the familiar aura, Gu Xingyin felt a little dizzy. However, she still maintained a trace of clarity. "Are you crazy? We won't have any results." Fang Yuhan continued, "But I can have memories. Surely, in 2 years, at least when I'm old, I'll have countless beautiful memories." He lowered his eyes and looked at Gu Xingyin. His eyes seemed to be filled with fragmented light. "Instead of living in fear for 2 whole years and not being able to get what I wanted." Gu Xingyin's heart wavered. She looked down and asked the system, "What do you think I should do now?" At this moment, the only person she could confide in was the system. A white light flashed from the system. "Host, if you leave this world in 2 years, can you accept your lover falling in love with another woman?" Gu Xingyin, "Although I don't want to admit that I'm selfish, I can't tolerate it." "Host, even if you don't agree to be with him, do you think your lover will feel better after you leave, or will he suffer the same pain after you leave?" Gu Xingyin. Based on her understanding of the system, it was probably the latter. The system concluded, "Host, what do you think you should choose?" Gu Xingyin wondered if the system was a spy sent by her lover. However, she couldn't deny that the system's analysis made sense. She thought for a moment and made a decision. Chapter 1241. She raised her head. Fang Yuhan was still in his previous position. The two of them were very close. When she raised her head, she could even feel his breathing. His gaze was calm, as if nothing could make this man show any hesitation. However, only Fang Yuhan himself knew exactly how nervous he was in his heart at that moment. His hand, which was resting on the sofa behind Gu Xingyin, had already sunk deep into the sofa. He used so much force that his knuckles hurt, but Fang Yuhan didn't care. Only this pain could make him feel the reality of the person in front of him. He looked at the person under him as she raised her head and looked at him with her beautiful eyes. His heart suddenly leaped into his throat. He knew that she already had her answer. Then, her face came closer and closer to him. Something warm touched her left cheek gently. He was stunned when he saw the person in front of him smile like a flower. "In that case, as you wish." As soon as Gu Xingyin said this, she felt a pair of strong arms wrap around her body. This hug was warm and strong. It gave her a sense of security. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but reach out and wrap her arms around his shoulders. They were so close together that she could clearly feel the man's heartbeat. It was urgent and strong. It showed that he wasn't as calm as he looked. Then, he let go of her. She was pulled up by the man. "What are you doing?" She was a little confused. Fang Yuhan's face was filled with pure joy and anticipation. "Of course, we're doing what couples should do." Gu Xingyin was pulled out of the door. This was the first time for Shirley in this world. It was also the first time for Fang Yuhan. They went to the most famous couple park, watched a tear-jerking emotional movie, and even had a romantic candle at dinner. The sky was completely dark. The two of them weren't in a hurry. They walked slowly on the overpass in the cool evening wind. Gu Xingyin raised her head. The sky was filled with bright stars. Not far away, there were thousands of lights. Beside her was the man who had always been by her side. "Are you cold?" Fang Yuhan hurriedly asked when he saw her suddenly stop. Gu Xingyin shook her head. It was just that she had a sudden change of heart. Originally, she had accepted her fate and was prepared to wait for the 2 years to come. Then, she would follow the original plot and use herself to suppress the dragon vein. Then, she would complete the mission of this world and move on to the next world. However, when she saw Fang Yuhan like this, she couldn't bear to part with him. If she left in 2 years, what would happen to him? Would he be alone in this world, waiting for death, or would he be in so much pain that he wished he was dead? Gu Xingyin couldn't be blamed for thinking too much. This man could really do such a thing. She knew that they would meet again. But no matter what happened in the next life, what happened in this life? She couldn't disregard Fang Yuhan's feelings just because the two of them had reunited countless times. Fang Yuhan was different from her. To Fang Yuhan, this life was his everything. She wanted to change. She didn't want to silently walk towards her destiny. The original plot only said that the spiritual beast was needed to suppress the dragon vein. It didn't say that the spiritual beast had to pay with its life. Chapter 1242. Fang Yuhan didn't know what she was thinking. He reached out and held Gu Xingyin's hands. After confirming that she wasn't cold, he breathed a sigh of relief. Gu Xingyin looked at his actions and felt a warmth in her heart. It was as if a warm iron had been applied to her heart. Such a gentle and careful man, how could she bear to let him suffer such a thing? She made up her mind in her heart. "Let's go home," she said. Fang Yuhan nodded and agreed. From that day onwards, Fang Yuhan's family began to change. In fact, there wasn't much difference. However, ever since Assistant Lu came once, he quietly reduced the number of times he came to his boss's house. This was because there were traces of the female owner. If his boss was alone, he could come as he pleased. After all, there was nothing to be worried about as two men. However, if there was a lady boss, he still had to be careful. Thinking of the girl he saw that day, Assistant Lu thought to himself, that girl looks so young. I wonder if she's an adult. As expected of the CEO, he acted so quickly. Gu Xingyin and Fang Yuhan lived their sweet lives. Fang Yuhan had to go to work every day, but Gu Xingyin didn't. She began to go to various legendary places deep in the mountains and forests to see the scenery. She also often went to some famous Buddhist temples and Taoist sects to observe. Fang Yuhan knew that she was different from ordinary humans, so he didn't control her. He only told her to be careful. On this day, Gu Xingyin was listening to a master's lecture in a temple when the system gave her a notification. Host, the mission target has committed suicide. Gu Xingyin's heart skipped a beat. And Weiwei hadn't been doing well these days. After they left, Fang Yuhan called the police. The police didn't have to put in much effort to catch An Weiwei, who was already mentally unstable. Murder was a serious crime. However, An Weiwei was still underage and her condition didn't seem normal. The police thought that she was pretending to be mentally unstable to avoid being charged, so they hired a professional doctor to examine her. After that, they confirmed that there was indeed something wrong with An Weiwei's mind. After such a thing happened, the An family was completely disappointed in her. They no longer cared about her and sent her directly to the mental hospital. At most, he would just throw in some money every month and let her fend for herself. It was easy to imagine how life in the mental hospital was like. However, what tormented An Weiwei the most was not this, but the endless nightmares. As soon as she closed her eyes, the animals she had once killed would drag their bloody bodies to her. Even if they were crazy, they would not let her go. In the end, An Weiwei was found dead in the ward by the nurse in charge of her early one morning. It was suicide. She somehow tore the sheets apart, tied them together, and hung them from the windowsill. It was said that her death was extremely gruesome. When she died, she was actually smiling. After listening to the system's explanation, Gu Xingyin was silent for a moment before asking, "Did you do it?" The system gave a negative answer. "My illusion lasted until the police caught An Weiwei." In other words, An Weiwei's nightmares and the malicious ghosts that she thought were coming for her life were just her own imagination. In the end, she still lost her life because of this. Disasters from the heavens can be avoided, but disasters from one's own doing cannot be avoided. Chapter 1243. A year had passed. There was still half a year left before the incident in the original plot. Fang Yuhan was almost obedient to Gu Xingyin. Since a year ago, he had stopped working overtime. Every day, he would finish his work and go home to accompany Gu Xingyin. The two of them often traveled to various places. Fang Yuhan never avoided letting others know about his relationship. The entire Fang Corporation knew that the CEO had a girlfriend who loved him more than anything else. Everyone in the business circle in City S also knew that the head of the Fang Corporation, who had never been close to women, had fallen in love. Gu Xingyin's appearance had also been seen by others. Those people were amazed by her beauty, but they could not find any information about her in private. They all thought that it was because Fang Yuhan was secretly protecting her. Little did they know that spiritual beasts did not belong to this world. How could they possibly find out anything about them? Those people could not find any information about Gu Xingyin. They only thought that the Fang Corporation was so powerful that they were even more afraid of the Fang Corporation. On this day, Gu Xingyin was playing with a very small seal in her hand. Fang Yuhan looked at it and felt that the seal was very simple. There were mysterious runes engraved on it. It seemed to be a good item. "What is this?" He took off his suit jacket and loosened his tie. Then, he sat down next to Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin did not avoid him. She said, "I found this in the mountains." Fang Yuhan did not ask further. He knew some of Shirley's hobbies. "Oh right, I plan to take a long vacation. We can go out and have fun," Fang Yuhan said. "Long vacation?" Gu Xingyin paused. "How long do you have?" Fang Yuhan's expression did not change as he said, "I'm not sure yet. The company's plan for the first half of the year has been completed. We have also just negotiated a cooperation with a foreign company. There shouldn't be any problems in the short term. I can rest for at least a few months." Gu Xingyin sighed. Fang Yuhan put his arm around her shoulder from behind. "Didn't you say you were going to see the snow mountain last time? I can go with you." Gu Xingyin broke into a smile and looked very happy. She threw herself into Fang Yuhan's arms and said, Okay. Since you have such a long vacation, let's visit the Great Snow Mountain and then go on a pilgrimage." Fang Yuhan lowered his head and looked at her lovingly. "Okay, you can go anywhere you want. I'll accompany you." Gu Xingyin buried her face in Fang Yuhan's chest and slowly stopped smiling. A few months of vacation? How could the person in charge of such a large corporation have so much free time? Moreover, these few months should be half a year, right? This man was really, she couldn't say anything that would dampen his mood. She could only hug him even harder. In a place where Gu Xingyin couldn't see, Fang Yuhan's eyes also became sad. Half a year. There was only half a year left for him and Shirley to spend together. The two of them were well aware of this, but they didn't say it out loud. They both knew, and they cherished each other. When the people in the Fang Corporation knew that their president was going to take such a long break, they all wondered if he was going to get married and go on a honeymoon with his wife. On behalf of all the employees in the secretary's office, Assistant Lu also gave Fang Yuhan their blessings. When Fang Yuhan heard his assistant's words of blessings for the two of them, he simply thanked her. "Thank you for your blessings. When I come back, if that day comes, all of you will get a year-end bonus." Chapter 1244. When Assistant Lu heard her boss's words, she left happily. From his point of view, a raise in salary was something that was already set in stone. He decided to tell his colleagues the good news later. However, he did not know that after he left, the smile on his boss's face completely disappeared. Fang Yuhan had never wanted to give his employees a year-end bonus so much. The next moment, his phone rang. The image that lit up on the screen was the image that he had imprinted in the deepest part of his heart. The corners of his mouth unconsciously curled into a smile. Surely, after hanging up the phone, he walked home with a relaxed smile. In the last 6 months, he wanted to leave a memory with no regrets between the two of them. In this way, even if Shirley really left this place, he would still be able to keep a little bit of her belongings. The snowy mountains, the sacred places, diving, and even the primeval forests. The two of them were going crazy. For half a year, they walked through all the famous scenic spots, kissed, and took photos. These antiques that had been silent for thousands of years silently witnessed the love between the two of them. Then, the 6 months were up. The two of them tacitly bought plane tickets home. How much longer? Fang Yuhan asked. Gu Xingyin calculated the days. It seemed that there were only a few days left. She shook her head and said, "I don't know the exact date." She did not have the heart to tell him. In fact, this was the truth. Because he did not know the exact time, Fang Yuhan still felt lucky. What if there was no such thing? Perhaps Shirley would not leave him. He still did not go to work. The two of them did not tell anyone that they were back, nor did they go anywhere. Fang Yuhan spent every day at home with Gu Xingyin. He did not dare to take his eyes off her. He was afraid that if he blinked, she would disappear. On this day, the two of them hugged each other and watched a movie. Suddenly, they felt a strong vibration. Earthquake. Fang Yuhan quickly got up and pulled Gu Xingyin downstairs. However, the vibration only lasted for a few seconds before it returned to normal. But to be safe, Fang Yuhan still held Gu Xingyin's hand and ran downstairs. Not only them, but many other residents also ran out of their houses. In his panic, Fang Yuhan did not forget to comfort Gu Xingyin. "Don't be afraid, Shirley. It's okay." Gu Xingyin gently shook her head, indicating that she was not afraid. Only she knew what had happened. An earthquake of unknown origin swept through half of the country. Fortunately, it did not cause any damage on the surface. The news even used a celebratory tone to report this matter. But everyone rejoiced too early. This was because this earthquake did not damage anything on the surface, but it damaged the terrain of the Dragon Coil mountain range. A perfectly intact dragon vein was forcefully severed from the neck. Nothing was happening right now. But Gu Xingyin knew that floods, droughts, and snowstorms would soon follow. It will slowly happen in this country. By the time some of the government agencies finally started to pay attention to it, a long time had already passed. Furthermore, the dragon vein was broken, and there was no way to undo it. In the original plot, it was because An Weiwei killed the spiritual beast. In this world, this country suffered huge losses because of the dragon vein. That was why Gu Xingyin came to complete the mission and turn the situation around. Chapter 1245. I want to eat hot pot tonight. Gu Xingyin lay lazily on the sofa. Her long snow-white hair slid down the sofa cushion to the ground like a piece of fine silk. Fang Yuhan couldn't help but reach out to touch it. Because Fang Yuhan loved to see her with snow-white hair and purple eyes, Gu Xingyin would remove her disguise when they were alone at home. Okay, I'll go buy some ingredients. Fang Yuhan looked at her lovingly and smiled. Shirley, who was in her human form, leaned lazily on the sofa. Her big eyes were half closed, and her long and curly eyelashes drooped quietly. Seeing that Gu Xingyin had no intention of going with him, Fang Yuhan got up and said, "What a lazy little thing." Gu Xingyin snorted softly to show her dissatisfaction. Fang Yuhan went out. When the tall and straight figure left, the figure who was still half lying on the sofa instantly put away the careless look on his face. All of a sudden, her figure blurred and she disappeared from the room. At the same time, in an extremely secluded mountain, an uninvited guest arrived at a quaint and solemn Taoist temple. As soon as Fang Yuhan arrived at the door with his things, the door automatically opened from the inside. Looking at Gu Xingyin, who was still lazily lying on the sofa, Fang Yuhan said helplessly, "What if someone else came? Wouldn't you give them a fright?" Gu Xingyin glanced at him lazily and said, "If it were someone else, I wouldn't open the door for them." Fang Yuhan was speechless. Well, when it came to bickering, he had never won against her. He smiled resignedly and went to the kitchen to wash the ingredients. Gu Xingyin quietly watched his back. She didn't look away when he walked around the living room and entered the kitchen. It was as if she could still see him through the wall. She didn't help because this man had always treated her like the delicate and fragile little Princess Shirley. He didn't let her touch these things at all. Even though she had been in human form for 2 years, even though Fang Yuhan knew that she was much stronger than he had imagined. However, he was still willing to take care of her and not let her be burdened by the hardships of life. The soup for the hot pot had been prepared a long time ago, so it did not take Fang Yuhan long to prepare it. The two of them happily finished their dinner and went for a walk. Finally, they snuggled up together and watched a movie. After a while, Gu Xingyin said that she was sleepy. Fang Yuhan looked at her in amusement. Although she had turned into a human, Shirley still maintained the habits of a psychic beast, and sleepiness was one of them. He had teased her about this matter before, but Gu Xingyin refuted him confidently, she was still in the growth stage. For spiritual beasts that had yet to reach adulthood, there was nothing more important than sleeping. Because of this sentence, during the 2 years that she had been in her human form, the two of them had slept on the same bed. However, Fang Yuhan had never done anything to her that he shouldn't have done. She was not an adult yet, so Fang Yuhan did not want to hurt her. Fang Yuhan was almost obedient to her. Gu Xingyin said that she was sleepy. Okay, Fang Yuhan did not say anything else. The two of them turned off the TV, washed up, and went to sleep. Fang Yuhan felt extra sleepy tonight. Not long after he got on the bed, his consciousness fell into a deep, dark dream. In the dream, he was wearing a well-ironed groom's suit and presenting the ring in his hand to the well-dressed bride beside him. Chapter 1246. Gu Xingyin sat up and quietly looked at the man with peaceful eyes in the dark. His expression was relaxed, and it was obvious that he was having a pleasant dream. She gently leaned over and planted a kiss on the corner of his lips. "I hope everything goes well." She was like a gust of wind, suddenly disappearing from this room filled with the aura of the two people. At this time, the cold stars and the cold moon were hanging high in the sky, and a white figure stood on the high mountain peak. Such a scene, in the eyes of outsiders, might seem like a young man who claimed to be artistic climbed up the mountain in the middle of the night to wait for the sunrise. Gu Xingyin stood on the highest peak of the Dragon Coil mountain range and looked down at the surrounding terrain. The mountains were steep, and they were tightly connected to each other, forming the largest mountain range in the world. This was a natural wonder, but somewhere, it felt a little out of place. Yes, out of place. Ordinary people couldn't see the knack of it, and would only feel that it didn't look as natural and comfortable as other places. But in Gu Xingyin's eyes, the scene presented was completely different. Her dark purple eyes seemed to be covered with a faint layer of mist, and the mountain range in front of her was clearly a huge dragon that stretched for tens of thousands of feet. But this huge dragon, which was supposed to be mighty and domineering, looked very dispirited at this time. The huge dragon head fell to the ground with a thud, and it had completely lost its former fierceness. Under its dragon head, there was an extremely wide crack that was visible to the naked eye. It cut down from the inside to the outside, almost cutting off the entire dragon's head and body. It was a ghastly sight. This dragon vein that had protected this country for hundreds of years had suffered the greatest damage since it was born. The dragon vein was connected to the country's fate. Now that the dragon vein had suffered such a damage, it was imaginable what kind of great damage this country would suffer in the future. Gu Xingyin withdrew her gaze. She remembered the man who was sleeping soundly in bed before she set off. In the past 2 years, she had been preparing for both sides. But after all, she didn't have the confidence to guarantee that she would come back, so she hadn't told him. Her body began to emit a faint white light. The radiance dissipated in the air like specks of fireflies. It was very beautiful. The light drifted away from Gu Xingyin's body, but it didn't disappear into the air. Instead, it seemed to be guided by something and drifted toward the dying dragon vein, sinking into the wound on its neck. The dragon vein seemed to have sensed something. It suddenly opened its eyes that were shining with golden light and looked at Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin smiled at her, and the radiance on her body became even more intense. The light was her cultivation, her body, and her true spirit. Using his body to suppress them. It was a complete sacrifice. Slowly, Gu Xingyin's body became a little blurry, and the light became more and more, brighter and brighter. If Gu Xingyin could still see, she would discover that the wound on the dragon's body had begun to heal slowly. Its withered eyes were also glowing with a new light. She couldn't maintain her human form anymore. The small ball of white light on the top of the mountain overshadowed the cold moonlight in the sky and became the only light on the top of the mountain. A gust of wind blew. The small ball of light seemed to be startled. It suddenly shattered and silently dissipated in the air. No one knew. Chapter 1247. Fang Yuhan woke up with a smile on his face. This dream could be said to be the greatest wish of his life. No, it was so sweet that he didn't even dare to think about it. Out of habit, he reached out to touch his side. His hands were cold. Fang Yuhan, who was still in a daze, immediately woke up. He opened his eyes, sat up, and stared blankly at the empty space beside him. Without hesitation, he got up and opened the door. There was no one in the living room, the sink, or the bathroom. He couldn't find that person anywhere. His heart began to ache as if it was being strangled by an invisible existence. Fang Yuhan forced himself to calm down. He took out his phone and dialed a number. A familiar ringtone sounded from his room. He walked into the room happily, but all he saw was a lonely phone lying under his pillow. The blood in his body seemed to freeze at that moment. It was already dawn outside, and the morning sun was refracting through the window. However, Fang Yuhan felt as if he had fallen into a cold darkness, and he could no longer be saved. Last night's dream was so beautiful, but when he woke up, reality was so cold. Fang Yuhan stood there expressionlessly as if he had suddenly lost his target. He didn't know what to do at this time. He just stood there in a daze as if he had lost his life. A familiar voice sounded from the room. Yuhan, by the time you hear this, I should have returned to my own world. Fang Yuhan immediately came back to his senses and quickly grabbed the phone under his pillow. Shirley's voice was automatically played from the phone. I didn't expect this day to come so suddenly. But don't be too sad. I've found a way to return to your side, but it's a little difficult. It might take a little longer. You must wait for me. One day, Shirley will return to your side. When the time comes, I hope to have a grand wedding with you, hun. The voice message ended. Fong Yuhan looked at the screen that lit up and then went dark again. Gradually, a glimmer of hope appeared in his heart because of her words. Would she come back? With trembling hands, he repeated the words over and over again. For 2 whole days, he did nothing but lie in bed and listen to Gu Xingyin's words on his phone. 2 days later. He got up, dressed neatly, shaved, and went to the barber shop to fix his hair. Then, he drove to work with a cold expression. It was no different from before. No, there were still some. Everyone in the Fong Corporation felt that their CEO had become colder than before. In the past, the CEO only looked cold. But now, standing beside him, she felt like she was going to get frostbitten. Unlike others, Assistant Lu, who had the most contact with Fong Yuhan, was a little worried. He knew that the CEO had a lover whom he treasured like a treasure. The CEO had even taken half a year off in order to travel with her. Assistant Lu thought they were going to get married. However, half a year later, when the CEO reappeared, the young lady was no longer by his side. Then, he thought about the drastic change in his CEO's temperament. Assistant Lu had to think more. Did they break up because of a conflict? But looking at the CEO's expression, it was obvious that he was deeply in love with that young lady and would grant her every request. Which woman wouldn't like such a fine and expressive man? Then, Assistant Lu thought of a more terrible possibility. Chapter 1248. Since the president became like this, was it possible that the young lady had already? Assistant Lu took a deep breath. He was shocked by his own conjecture, but he vaguely felt that this was more likely to be the truth than a breakup. He carefully opened the door of the president's office and looked at the president who was sitting in front of the computer, concentrating on the company's affairs. He wanted to ask. But he didn't know how to ask. In the end, Fong Yuhan's gaze shifted from the screen. He asked faintly, "What can I do for you?" Assistant Lu panicked. He stared at the president's oppressive eyes and asked, "Why haven't I seen Shirley recently?" After saying this, Assistant Lu felt great. Look at how witty I am. But at that moment, he felt that the president's aura became colder. Assistant Lu felt that the president raised his head and stared at him coldly. Then the president said coldly, "Shirley is sick. I won't take her out for a while." As soon as he heard that Shirley was sick, Assistant Lu immediately became nervous. He hurriedly asked, "Is Shirley sick? Is it serious? Can I go and see her?" Fong Yuhan's expression remained cold. "No need. I'll bring her out when she recovers." Assistant Lu sighed regretfully, but he knew that the president was a man of his word. If the president said that he couldn't see Shirley, he couldn't even enter the door. After work, he went home and opened the door. The room was cold and silent. Fong Yuhan turned on the light, and the whole house was empty. Before he met Shirley, he had never felt like this. After he met Shirley, the whole house was full of vitality. Only after she left did he know what despair was. He slowly sat down on the sofa. He relaxed himself and nestled on the sofa in a very comfortable position. This was Shirley's favorite position. He pretended that she was still by his side. He didn't want to eat or move. He closed his eyes and fell into a dream on the sofa, which still had Shirley's scent. Only in dreams could he have a moment of peace and joy. A month had passed. He was not afraid of waiting. As long as Shirley could come back, what was a month? Even if he had to wait for a year or 10 years. As long as she could come back. As long as he was still alive. He could continue to wait. He had once wondered if Shirley was lying to him. She was never going to come back, but she was lying to him that she would. But as soon as such a thought appeared, he subconsciously extinguished it. Shirley wouldn't lie to her. Since she had promised him, she would definitely come back. Another 2 months passed. The employees of the Fong Corporation were already used to their CEO's indifference. They went from trembling in fear to being used to it. Anyway, as long as she worked hard, the CEO would only be a little cold and would not make trouble for no reason. One day, Fong Yuhan was about to get off work when his phone suddenly rang. "Hello, Mr. Fong." "I am, and you are?" "Hello, Mr. Fong, I'm Fengxing Express. Here is a package for you. Is it convenient for you to sign for it?" Fong Yuhan frowned. He hadn't bought anything on the internet. "You've got the wrong person." The courier paused for a moment, then read out his address and phone number word by word. Fong Yuhan's heart skipped a beat. This was his private number, and not many people knew about it. Who would send him something? Chapter 1249. Fong Yuhan drove home. At the door of his house, he saw a delivery man in a uniform. The residents who lived in this area were either rich or powerful, and the package was insured. The delivery man didn't dare to leave the package casually. If it was really something valuable, he might not be able to afford it with a year's salary. "Thank you." Fong Yuhan glanced at the package. It was indeed addressed to him. He gave the delivery man an extra tip, and the delivery man left happily. When he opened the door, Fong Yuhan didn't feel sad immediately. Instead, he focused on the package in his hand. He was a little nervous, and an inexplicable sense of anticipation lingered in his heart. Fong Yuhan carefully cut the package with scissors and slowly opened the huge cardboard box with both hands. The contents of the box caught his eye. With one glance, Fong Yuhan felt as if something was blocking his eyes. The little white ball that he was so familiar with was caught off guard and crashed into his eyes. Fong Yuhan's hands trembled. He slowly reached his hand in and carefully held her out. "Shirley!" he called out softly. The little white ball looked at him curiously with her big, dark purple eyes. There was curiosity and intimacy in her eyes, but there was no admiration that he was familiar with. This familiar yet unfamiliar Shirley made Fong Yuhan's excited heart instantly turn cold. At this moment, he noticed that there was a letter in the alley. Fong Yuhan held the confused Shirley in one hand and picked up the letter with the other. He opened it. There was beautiful calligraphy inside, and it explained some things in detail. It was completely different from what Shirley had told him. She didn't return to her own world. Instead, she went to save countless people in this country, back a few months ago. Gu Xingyin came alone to a Taoist temple that was isolated from the rest of the world. She used the seal in her hand in exchange for all the cultivation of the 3 respected elders in the Taoist temple. "I want to live." After explaining her intentions, she said this to them. The person in front of them might lose her life in order to save the entire country. In her hand, she held the seal that had been lost for thousands of years. The 3 elders had no way of refusing either of these 2 requests. What Gu Xingyin meant was that the moment her true spirit was annihilated, the 3 elders would sacrifice all of their cultivation to perform a ritual for her and snatch that slim chance of survival from the jaws of death. This was a very risky approach. In the end, it was very likely that the 3 elders would lose their cultivation and Gu Xingyin would not be able to come back to life. However, they didn't expect that the dragon vein, which had received great kindness from Gu Xingyin, would open its mouth and let out a deafening dragon roar in the instant that Gu Xingyin's true spirit was annihilated. At that moment, many people in Jingdo heard the sound of rolling thunder in their sleep. The dragon vein acted and protected the last bit of Gu Xingyin's true spirit. After that, Gu Xingyin's true spirit began to cultivate under the protection of the dragon vein. The dragon vein was the place with the densest spiritual energy and providence in the entire country. Cultivating here for a day was equivalent to cultivating for a year. However, the dragon vein was favored by the heavenly Tao. If it wasn't willing, no matter how powerful a cultivator was, they wouldn't dare to forcefully snatch it. The resentment of hundreds of millions of people wasn't something that a single cultivator could bear. Even so, Gu Xingyin stayed in the dragon vein for a full 3 months before she managed to cultivate her true body again. Chapter 1250. However, she had only returned to her true body. The dissipation of one's true spirit was a very serious matter. Gu Xingyin, who had regained her life, had completely forgotten her past. Her personality was similar to that of an uncivilized little beast. The 3 elders of the Taoist temple personally came to take Gu Xingyin back. According to their previous agreement, they wrote down the ins and outs of the entire incident and sent it to Fang Yuhan, along with Gu Xingyin. Fang Yuhan silently read the entire letter. He was angry and heartbroken. She was clearly a child, a little beast that had yet to reach adulthood, yet she had to bear such a huge responsibility. She even lied to him and said that she was going back. Did she not think about what would happen if she didn't come back and was left alone? Was she going to wait here foolishly for someone who would never come back? Fang Yuhan's eyes were about to burst into flames as he stared at the little white ball in his hand. He was so angry that he wanted to hit her twice. However, the little white ball, who had lost her memories, could not understand his feelings. She simply opened her big eyes and looked curiously at the human in front of her. This human had a very familiar aura. She couldn't help but want to get closer to him. Looking at the little white ball who wanted to stick to him, the anger in Fang Yuhan's heart completely turned into a puddle of spring water. His hands had already uncontrollably lifted her body and smoothed her fur very naturally. The little beast in his hand hummed as if she was very comfortable. From time to time, she would swing her furry tail as if to express her satisfaction. She was really a little sin sent by the heavens to torture him. Fang Yuhan thought to himself. However, a gentle smile appeared on his face. Even if it was a sin, it belonged to him alone. A sweet sin. The system silently stood to the side and looked at the man and the beast. The host had chosen her own path this time. In order to comply with the heavens, the system could not make an exception and wake the host up. It could only wait for the host to recover her memories in this life. She might return to normal tomorrow after sleeping. It was also possible that she could only be like this for the rest of her life. The employees of the Fang Corporation felt that spring had arrived. The president became inexplicably gentle again. When Assistant Lu went to work in the morning, she met Fang Yuhan, who happened to come to work. She greeted him as usual. Such a greeting was usually met with a cold nod. However, this time, Fang Yuhan actually smiled and said, "Good morning." Assistant Lu, he hurriedly looked at the sky outside the floor-to-ceiling window. It's normal. The sun rises from the east. Fang Yuhan looked at his stupid assistant and sneered in disdain. He did not want to talk to him at all. There was a rustling sound in his pocket. It seemed that the little guy had woken up. Sitting alone in the office, Fang Yuhan placed Shirley in his pocket on the sofa and got up to open the window. Outside was a bright blue sky, and the warm sunlight shone on their bodies, making them feel comfortable and couldn't help but smile. On the sofa cushion was the person he loved the most in his life. Even if she could never become a human again, Fang Yuhan would not mind. He was already satisfied that the heavens had sent her to his side once again. When Fang Yuhan turned around, he was stunned. The man, who had always been calm and composed, looked at the white-haired woman on the sofa. After being stunned for a moment, tears fell from his eyes. Gu Xingyin looked at him with a smile. "Yuhan, I'm back." Chapter 1251. The president was getting married. All the employees of the Fang Corporation received the news. Everyone was happy. Why? Because the president said that everyone would get a year-end bonus. While everyone was happy, Assistant Lu was also very happy. However, while he was happy, he also had a small doubt in his heart. Previously, the president and his wife. Yes, at this time, the president's wife was already the president's wife. The two of them went out to have fun, but only the president came back. And from then on, the CEO rose from a freezer to a moving iceberg. He once wondered if the president's wife had an accident. Now, a few months had passed, and the president's wife was back. So, the president was once again under her care. So, the president and his wife must have had a conflict at that time, right? When he told his girlfriend about his guess, she gave him a look of disdain. So, what does this have to do with you? Assistant Lu was stunned. Yes, thinking so much, what did this have to do with him? Assistant Lu, who was suddenly enlightened, happily received an invitation from his boss and took his girlfriend to the wedding banquet. Fang Yuhan was very attentive to this wedding. From the location and environment to the decorations of the priest, he personally asked about everything, big or small. He had promised Shirley that when she came back, he would definitely prepare a grand wedding for her. He would do his best to give her the most perfect wedding. Without a doubt, such a wedding was very rare, even in the recognized upper-class circle. Many people talked about it, saying that the head of the Fang Corporation must love his wife very much. From the wedding, one could tell if a man was very attentive to his wife. Fang Yuhan had prepared this wedding with his heart, not to mention his heart. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he had prepared it with his heart. Gu Xingyin's wedding dress was specially designed for the royal family of country Y. A master designer had tailor-made it for her at a cost of tens of millions. Not to mention the other small diamonds on the crown on her head, the sapphire in the center of the crown alone was worth 9 figures. It was said that President Fang had spent all his fortune on his wife. Many guests at the wedding said that it was not worth it. However, most of the noblewomen were secretly envious of the breathtakingly beautiful bride on the high platform. To be able to receive such wholehearted love from her husband, as a woman, this Madame Fang was enough to receive the envy of most women. Fang Yuhan held Gu Xingyin's hand, and the two of them walked up to the priest. Under the witness of the gods and all the guests, they became husband and wife. From then on, regardless of whether they were rich or poor, or the passage of time, they would be one, sharing honor and disgrace, loving each other until they grew old. Fang Yuhan gently slipped the ring on Gu Xingyin's middle finger. The guests present burst into warm applause. Fang Yuhan gently wrapped his arm around Gu Xingyin's waist and leaned over to kiss her lips. Today, the person I love the most in my life finally belongs to me. Today, the greatest wish of my life has been perfectly realized. Thank the heavens for bestowing upon me such a unique treasure. Chapter 1252. Gu Xingyin and Fang Yuhan lived a happy life. Even though they never had a child. After all, Gu Xingyin's body was left with irreparable damage. For example, her lifespan was limited. For example, she could not conceive. However, these were nothing to Fang Yuhan. As long as she was by his side, nothing else mattered. For Gu Xingyin, having children was a matter of convenience. Mortals had children because they needed to pass down their legacies. She was essentially an immortal existence. Unlike some intelligent creatures, she was not obsessed with the continuation of her descendants. As for her lifespan, she did not care about it. If her lifespan was shorter, she could die with Fang Yuhan. For her, it was much better than being alone in this world. After this world ended, Gu Xingyin quickly started the next world's mission. When she woke up, she was lying comfortably in a huge hot spring with her eyes closed. Someone was rubbing her back gently from behind. Gu Xingyin did not open her eyes. Instead, she began to receive the memories of this world. Princess Yongla, Su Baochan, was the only sister of Emperor Longqing. She was the youngest daughter of the Empress Dowager. When she was born, Emperor Longqing, who was still the crown prince, had already had a son. The late emperor and the Empress Dowager loved their daughter. Emperor Long Qing also paid close attention to his younger sister, who was younger than his son. Since she was young, Princess Yongle had been able to do whatever she wanted in the imperial harem. After the late emperor passed away, her brother ascended the throne. After her mother became the Empress Dowager, she became even more powerful. She was the only sister of the emperor, the beloved daughter of the Empress Dowager, and the emperor personally conferred her the title of Princess Royal. In the entire imperial harem, except for the Empress Dowager, even the empress had to curry favor with this precious sister-in-law. In terms of nobility, Princess Yongle, Su Baochan, was the pinnacle of women. In terms of beauty, the Su royal family had always been known for their beauty. Su Baochan was a rare beauty among beauties. The dazzling Princess Royal was someone all the noble ladies in the Qin kingdom wanted to curry favor with. As for those noble families, all of them secretly warned their direct descendants to know how to win the favor of the eldest princess. In this dynasty, there was no such thing as a son-in-law not being able to enter the court. If anyone was lucky enough to marry the eldest princess, even if he was an idiot, the emperor would give him a noble status for the sake of his sister. Eldest Princess Yongle had naturally developed an arrogant personality under such an environment and pampering. However, being arrogant and willful was one thing, but she had the capital to do so. At least, after reading the memories of the original Gu Xingyin, he knew that although Su Baochan was a little arrogant, she wasn't a bad person and wouldn't do anything to harm others. Moreover, in the original world, the Tianlong dynasty, which was the neighbor of the Qing dynasty, sent an envoy to ask for the hand of their emperor. The other party was the emperor of a country. Naturally, the Qin kingdom could not casually use the daughter of an official to brush him off. However, the princesses of the current dynasty had already been married off. The only one left was the 17-year-old eldest Princess Yongle. Eldest Princess Yongle could refuse. Emperor Long Qing also couldn't bear to part with his sister, who was more important than his own daughter. However, eldest Princess Yongle knew that being on good terms with the Tianlong dynasty was a very good thing for the Qin kingdom. Chapter 1253. The Qin kingdom valued agriculture, but the Tianlong dynasty valued martial arts. In the whole continent, the Sky Dragon dynasty was the strongest, and their weapons were also the most advanced. The messenger of the Tianlong dynasty once said that if the Qin kingdom was willing to be on good terms with the Tianlong dynasty, they would give the most advanced weapons as a betrothal gift. The Tianlong dynasty was very sincere. The eldest Princess Yongle knew the significance of these drawings. They could even improve the Qin kingdom's martial arts. She knelt in front of her brother without hesitation, expressing her willingness to go to the Qin kingdom. Emperor Long Qing was an emperor after all. In front of his country, no matter how much he favored his sister, she was inferior. Half a year later, the eldest Princess Yongle set off for the Tianlong dynasty with a large group of people. She married into another country, but brought priceless treasures to her own country. The eldest Princess Yongle became a figure praised by everyone in the Qin kingdom. Even the history books wrote about her. The legendary Princess Yongle. However, there was a deviation in history at some point. When the favored princes and princesses of the Su royal family were about 10 years old, the royal family would prepare their own secret guards. There were also doubles. These doubles were children who looked similar to the princes and princesses. From the age of 10, they were made to learn the habits and manners of their masters. Every day, they were molded and given medicine. After a few years, they would become the shadows of their masters. If the two of them stood together without making a sound, even the people closest to them would not be able to tell who was who. Su Baochan had a double like this. The double's name was Ying Qi. He had been with her for 7 years. The purpose of these doubles was to protect their masters when they were about to go somewhere they did not want to go or when they were in danger. These doubles had been brainwashed since they were young. The only thought in their minds was that they were the masters. But Ying Qi was different. While Su Baochan and no one else were aware of it, she had a different thought in her mind. She was jealous of Su Baochan. She clearly had the same appearance and figure as Su Baochan. But Su Baochan was the high and mighty princess, while she was just a double who lived in the shadows. One day, she might die for her master. Why? She felt that her chance had come because of the eldest Princess Yonla's marriage. If they were in the capital, she wouldn't have dared to make a move. Although she thought she was very similar to Su Baochan, this was Princess Royal Yonla's home after all. There were too many people who knew her. If she was not careful, she might be exposed. However, going to the Tianlong dynasty for a political marriage was different. At that time, he just had to think of a way to get rid of the eldest princess' personal servants and replace them with his own people. The people of the Sky Dragon dynasty wouldn't know what the real eldest Princess Yonla was like. Who would suspect that she had been swapped? The more Ying-chi thought about it, the more he felt this idea was feasible. When eldest Princess Yonla was ready to set off, Ying-chi attacked. No one knew that it wasn't eldest Princess Yonla herself under the luxurious clothes. But the Emperor of the Sky Dragon dynasty knew. The moment he saw Ying-chi, he knew that she wasn't the real eldest Princess Yonla. Ying-chi naturally didn't dare say that it was him who dared to kill the real Princess Royal. The Emperor of Tianlong thought that the Qing dynasty had substituted a peach for a peach and killed the fake substitute in anger. They headed straight for the Qing army. And Emperor Long Qing thought that the Tianlong dynasty had broken the agreement and killed his own sister. Naturally, he couldn't take it lying down. They were all the top countries on the continent. The two sides had been at war for several years, and the other countries on the continent were swept in as well. After 8 years of war, the two sides couldn't take any more losses and reconciled. But after this battle, countless people on the continent were injured and starved. The vitality of the country was greatly damaged. Chapter 1254. Gu Xingyin let out a sigh of relief. In the original plot, there was a huge misunderstanding between the Qin kingdom and the Tianlong dynasty. Presumably, that substitute Ying-chi never thought that his little selfish jealousy would lead to such serious consequences, right? System, why would the emperor of the Tianlong dynasty know that Ying-chi is not the real Princess Yonla? Gu Xingyin asked curiously. Logically speaking, the two of them should have never met before. The system flashed, it is not revealed in the plot. The host needs to find out on her own. Gu Xingyin was silent. Alright, then I'll draw the skill. Yes, host. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the Blood Clan's immortality skill. Immortality skill? Gu Xingyin was confused. The system explained, yes, host. The immortality skill means that the host has the same skill as the Blood Clan. As long as the blood in the body does not dry up, no matter how injured you are, you can slowly recover and recover. In other words, it means that I have an immortality aura. Yes, host. However, the natural aging of the body does not count. Gu Xingyin nodded, I understand. She was quite satisfied with the skill in this world. After all, even though eldest Princess Yonla had a noble status, she was a weak and delicate girl. Who knew what would happen to her? With this immortality skill, it could be said that she had gained a huge trump card. Gu Xingyin raised her arm and looked at it. The hot spring water was smooth and creamy. Although she did not know what Princess Yonla looked like, her soft and smooth skin was enough to make most girls blush. Enough. She said calmly. Behind her, he stopped massaging her. When she got up from the hot spring, a maid immediately covered her with a soft towel and gently dried the water droplets on her body. Gu Xingyin changed her clothes with the help of a maidservant and lay down on the soft couch beside the hot spring pool. The maidservant half knelt beside her and helped her dry her hair. Ying-chi. Gu Xingyin suddenly called out. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of the couch. This elusive movement was enough to show that this woman had extraordinary martial arts skills. Gu Xingyin opened her eyes and carefully observed Ing Chi's appearance. According to the plot, Ing Chi looked exactly like Elder Princess Yongle, so Gu Xingyin believed that Elder Princess Yongle was the most beautiful woman in the Su royal family. It was indeed beautiful. Beautiful but not bewitching, gorgeous but not extraordinary. This woman was only kneeling on the ground with her head slightly lowered without any expression, but she could still make men in the world hold treasures in their hands, just to make her lower her eyes to look at them. Ing Chi, how long have you been with me? Ing Chi's heart went cold, not knowing why Her Royal Highness had asked him such a question. Your Highness, it has been exactly 7 years. 7 years. Gu Xingyin sighed and said faintly, being branded with another person's shadow and losing yourself, it must have been hard on you these past few years. She had only spoken such a simple sentence, but Ing Chi felt his skin tighten at this moment. Had his thoughts been discovered by Her Royal Highness? No, that was impossible. She had concealed it very well. Chapter 1255. Ing Chi bowed her head heavily to the ground. It is Ing Chi's honor to be able to share the eldest princess burdens. This time, her forehead hit the white jade floor and made a clear sound. Gu Xingyin felt a headache just listening to her. But the words that needed to be said still had to be said. Ing Chi, I'll set you free, how about it? Ing Chi suddenly raised her head. Gu Xingyin didn't mind her offense and just continued, leave this place and find a small town where no one knows you and live your own life. You don't need to live for others anymore. Ing Chi was silent. She was moved. It was impossible to say she wasn't moved. Only those who had been a substitute would know how hopeless it was to do so. Always hiding in the shadows of others, others couldn't see you, didn't know you, and wouldn't remember you. Living in this world, there wasn't even a witness. Never to see the light of day. Moreover, in order to maintain the same appearance as their master, they needed to secretly train day after day and take medicine. That kind of thing, if used for a long time, would definitely have an impact on the body. At least according to Ing Chi's understanding, no substitute had ever lived past the age of heaven's will. If it was before, knowing that she could regain her freedom, Ing Chi wouldn't have hesitated to agree. But now, in her eyes was Gu Xingyin's elegant side profile. Even if she had just come out of a bath and didn't have any luxurious accessories on her body, just sitting here, she was so dazzling that people couldn't take their eyes off her. After following eldest Princess Yongle for 7 years, she naturally knew how luxurious and exquisite the other's life was. Every day, eldest Princess Yongle had to apply the palace's secret congealed cream to her body twice, which was why her skin was whiter and smoother than a newborn baby's. The eldest princess's black hair was as smooth as ink and there were 2 palace maids responsible for taking care of it. The eldest princess only drank flower tea made from frosted flower buds. Ing Chi lowered her eyes. As eldest Princess Yongle's substitute, she was naturally carefully raised. Although she couldn't compare to the eldest princess, she was still much more precious than the average noble lady. If she were to leave, what else would she be able to enjoy? Having gone out with the eldest princess before, Ing Chi had seen many women with sallow skin, rough hands, and loud voices. Poverty had erased their feminine beauty, and their manners were crude and rude. If she went out, would she also become like them? Ing Chi had already made a decision in his heart. Reporting to Your Highness Grand Princess, Ing Chi is willing to share Your Highness's burdens for a lifetime. She heard her own voice. Then, she heard the person above her laugh mysteriously. You may leave. Ing Chi left as quietly as he had come. Gu Xingyin waved her hand behind her. I'm tired. I'll rest for a while. All of you, go down. Don't leave anyone here. Not only did he mean those on the surface, but he also meant those in the dark. The maidservants quietly retreated. Gu Xingyin closed her eyes and thought about Ing Chi's words. She had given the other party a chance to choose, but it was obvious Ing Chi didn't want it. She had thought that Ing Chi had become disloyal after eldest Princess Yongla's marriage, but now it seemed, his wild ambitions had been buried long ago. Chapter 1256. Gu Xingyin reached out and gently pressed down on a spot on the bed. A secret compartment appeared under the pillow. She looked over it and saw that there were all kinds of small things inside. He reached out and took out a small white porcelain bottle. He opened it and poured out the bright red pills inside. Gu Xingyin placed it at the tip of his nose and sniffed it gently. A fragrant smell wafted out. This was the method the Su royal family used to control these hidden guards. Every 3 months, the hidden guards would have to go to their master to get a bottle of antidote. Moreover, each member of the royal family would not have the same antidote. In other words, even if they wanted to betray their master, they would not be able to. Gu Xingyin put the bottle back and the pillow returned to normal as she slowly laid down. The reason why Ing Chi did not dare to make a move was not only because there were too many people in the capital familiar with eldest Princess Yongla, but also because of this. Perhaps it was because when eldest Princess Yongla went out for the political marriage, her arrangements were not as secretive as in the capital, giving Ing Chi an opportunity. But for sure, since Ing Chi dared to make a move on eldest Princess Yongla, she definitely knew how to get the antidote. Gu Xingyin thought in a daze. Waves of tiredness came over her and she fell asleep while leaning against him. Then she was woken up by the system. "Host, someone is coming." Gu Xingyin opened her eyes and looked around the hall. She did not see anyone. "In the hot spring," the system told her. Gu Xingyin looked down at the calm surface of the hot spring and felt admiration for the person who came. How did he do it without causing any splash when a living person jumped into the water? Did he come for eldest Princess Yongla? The system said, "Shouldn't be. I only saw that he was being chased and came here in a hurry." Gu Xingyin raised her brows. This was a side palace outside the capital. It was specially built for the youngest daughter of the previous emperor when he was still here. Because eldest Princess Yongla liked peach blossoms, there were countless peach trees planted in the side palace. It was spring now. Princess Royal Yongla thought that the peach blossoms in her side palace had bloomed, so she came to stay here for a few days. The guards in the side palace were naturally not as good as those in the imperial palace, but they were not something that ordinary people could compare to. To be able to hide from the eyes and ears of the palace guards and enter her palace, this person's ability was not small. Gu Xingyin was about to call someone over without hesitation. That person didn't make any moves, but who knew if he would make a move on him later? She wasn't willing to hand over the initiative to someone else. But the system stopped her. "Host, you can't touch that person." Gu Xingyin was puzzled. "What's wrong? You know him?" The system replied, "This person is the future emperor of the Sky Dragon dynasty." Gu Xingyin, she was a little surprised. If she remembered correctly, the current emperor of Tianlong had just passed away, and the first prince, Long Xiao, who was leading troops outside, had ascended the throne. Then, why would the first prince, who was about to become the new emperor of the Sky Dragon dynasty, appear in the faraway Qin kingdom? But, she remembered that in the original plot, eldest Princess Yongla met an injured man in the side palace. She didn't know that the man was the future emperor of Tianlong, but Long Xiao knew her identity. This could explain why Long Xiao knew eldest Princess Yongla. Chapter 1257. Thinking about the system's words, Gu Xingyin almost instantly imagined a great drama in the royal family, where the first prince, who had yet to ascend to the throne, would be assassinated on the road in order to gain the upper hand in the fight for power. But what did this have to do with her, Gu Xingyin? Of course it did. If the Emperor of Sky Dragon died, Where would eldest Princess Yongle go to get married and complete her quest as the legendary Princess Yongle? Thinking of this, she felt a headache coming on. It really was troublesome. She had to complete her quest. If the Emperor of Sky Dragon was her lover, it would be best. Then everyone would be happy. If not, she would need to use some small tricks. However, according to the Heaven's love for the protagonist, she felt that the former was very likely. Who cares, she would see this Long Xiao first. Gu Xingyin slowly got up from the soft couch and calmly said to the air, "Come out." The room was silent. Gu Xingyin did not care. She waited for a while and found that the other party had no intention of coming out, so she continued to say, "If you don't come out, when my secret guard comes, I can't guarantee what will happen next." As soon as her voice fell, there was a "hua" sound and the sound of water came from the hot spring pool. Before she could take a look, she felt a scorching hot body pressing against her back. At the same time, the fragrance of the lotus wrapped around her. It really was him. Gu Xingyin let out a sigh of relief. Then her throat was gripped by a calloused hand. A low voice sounded in her ears, "I'm really sorry, I need to stay here for a few days. I hope your highness can cooperate with me. Otherwise, this one will need to use some special methods." His breath was hot and it sprayed on Gu Xingyin's sensitive earlobe. That little fellow that was like white jade instantly turned red like blood. Long Xiao felt his breathing become heavy and he almost couldn't control himself from wanting to take a bite. In fact, he did this. Gu Xingyin's body trembled. Bastard! This was the first time they met and he was already taking advantage of her. What a lecher! She heard herself say in a sinister voice, "If you dare to touch me again, I'll get someone to cut off one of your fingers." Long Xiao was also awakened by her words. Just now, what was he doing? He loosened his grip, and after confirming that Gu Xingyin did not have any internal energy, he cooperated and released her. Gu Xingyin then turned around and looked at Long Xiao carefully. His long eyebrows reached his temples, his eyes were clear and spirited, his nose was high, and his thin lips were tightly pursed. He was a rare handsome man. Long Xiao silently let her size him up. He had a noble status in Sky Dragon and had met many beauties who threw themselves at him, but he did not know why he was not interested in them at all. Even the way they looked at him made him very uncomfortable. But the person in front of him was different. When he noticed that the other party's gaze fell on him, he even subconsciously puffed out his chest, like a male beast that had been seeking a mate and wanted to show his most handsome and awe-inspiring side in front of a female beast. This situation made Long Xiao, who had never studied the relationship between men and women, understand that he was interested in this woman. He knew who she was. Qin Kingdom's eldest Princess Yongle. A world-famous beauty. Chapter 1258. While Gu Xingyin was sizing up Long Xiao was also sizing up Gu Xingyin. To be honest, if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Long Xiao would never have known that there was such an exquisite beauty in this world. She was like a person who had been carefully piled up with luxurious clothes, gold, jade, and jewelry since she was young. Even a strand of her hair looked very precious. But these were not the most important things. What Long Xiao was most interested in was not her beauty, but, when he hugged this woman just now, the satisfaction that surged from the bottom of his heart and from the depths of his soul surged out. It was as if as long as he hugged her, he would have everything. That kind of feeling was too fascinating. Unfortunately, he seemed to have angered the beauty in front of him. Gu Xingyin looked at the man staring at her without blinking. With her current status, as a princess who had been doted on since she was young and no one dared to disobey her, her reaction was even colder. Anyone could see that she was in a bad mood at this time. Gu Xingyin looked at the man in front of her coldly. "What are you looking at?" Long Xiao answered very honestly, "I'm looking at you." "How dare you?" Gu Xingyin was so angry that her face turned red. Little did she know that she had just taken a bath and was wearing a thin undergarment. Because of her contact with Long Xiao just now, there were a lot of water stains on her clothes. Looking at her like this, she was really fragrant. At least Long Xiao felt a little hot when he looked at her. Gu Xingyin lowered her head in hindsight. After glancing at her appearance, she grabbed a robe beside her and put it on herself. She met Long Xiao's gaze and said coldly, "If you look at me again, I'll dig out your eyeballs." Long Xiao looked at the woman in front of him with some amusement. As a person who had been on the battlefield all year round, he was the most sensitive to murderous aura. From the beginning to the end, he didn't sense any murderous aura from Princess Yongle. Even when she said that she would dig out his eyeballs, there was no murderous aura. She was just threatening him. However, Long Xiao still obediently lowered his gaze because she seemed to be really angry. However, when he lowered his eyes, Long Xiao realized that from his angle, he could see the corner of Gu Xingyin's clothes embroidered with exquisite dark patterns, and it revealed a small part of her ankles that was as delicate as jade. It was really beautiful. He praised in his heart. Gu Xingyin did not know what Long Xiao was thinking at this time. She began her routine interrogation. "Who are you? Why did you sneak into my palace so late at night?" Long Xiao naturally could not reveal his identity. He casually fabricated an identity and story. Fortunately, Gu Xingyin did not pursue the matter. She only gave Long Xiao a warning look. "I don't want to know whether what you said is true or false. I'm in a good mood today, so I don't want to pursue certain matters. If you leave now, I can pretend that nothing happened." Long Xiao suddenly covered his abdomen and squatted down in pain. Gu Xingyin's eyebrows twitched, but she looked shocked and asked, "What's wrong with you?" Long Xiao looked at the panic that flashed through her eyes and laughed in his heart. As expected, she was a little rabbit who had never seen blood. Although he pretended to be an old scheming fox, his acting skills were still not good enough. He frowned in pain. "It's nothing. It's just a small injury. Gu Xingyin, don't think that I don't know that the Emperor of Tianlong is a person who doesn't even frown when a sharp blade enters his body. Didn't you work so hard for me to see?" Chapter 1259. But since her lover was putting in this much effort, of course she had to do her best to cooperate. So Gu Xingyin knit her brows and revealed a look of disgust as she said to Long Xiao, "Take off your clothes and let me see." Long Xiao secretly thought that it was as expected, but he pretended to be unwilling on the surface. So Gu Xingyin revealed an even more arrogant attitude, "This one orders you to take off your clothes. Otherwise, you will immediately scram from here." Under the cold eldest princess coercion, Long Xiao had no choice but to untie his belt. While doing this, he helplessly said, "Eldest princess, you are the first woman to see my body." Gu Xingyin. He's even addicted. She pretended not to hear this. Only when Long Xiao revealed the wound on his body, Gu Xingyin took in a cold breath. This was not an act, but rather an instinctive shock. She saw that on Long Xiao's skinny waist, there was a several-inch long wound that went from his hip bone to his heart. The wound was very deep and Gu Xingyin could even see the red flesh inside. The edges of the wound were already turning black. It was clear that it had not been treated for a long time and had already begun to fester and become inflamed. It was a good thing that he could endure it. Gu Xingyin remembered that in the beginning, this man had a calm appearance when he threatened her. No one could tell that this was a man who was seriously injured. Moreover, he was soaked in water. Gu Xingyin angrily raised her head and met Long Xiao's gaze. Long Xiao saw that her eyes were a bit red and thought that he had scared her. That's right, a princess who had been pampered in the palace, how could she have seen such a terrifying wound? He apologetically covered the wound with his robe and said to Gu Xingyin, "Did I scare the eldest princess?" I swear that I have no ill intentions towards the eldest princess. Once the soldiers leave, I will immediately leave this palace. Gu Xingyin only glared at him before turning to leave with an expressionless face. Long Xiao felt helpless. What kind of situation was this? She looked very angry, but she didn't call anyone over. His original plan was to use force to force the eldest princess to take him in for a few days, but after seeing her in person, he found that his heart was as hard as iron and he couldn't do it. Yes, he just couldn't do it. He didn't have the heart to force or threaten this woman. In the past, he had heard stories about beauties and heroes, but he had scoffed at them. He had always thought that as a man, he should focus on his career. As for love, it was just a small matter. However, even though his rationality told him that subduing this woman was beneficial to him, he could only watch as she walked out of the hall. Perhaps in the next moment, he would be surrounded and killed by the guards of this palace. It must be because the wound was inflamed, causing his mind to be muddled. Long Xiao smiled bitterly. He had actually done such an irrational thing. He no longer had the strength to leave this place. His body was burning up, and it was the piercing pain from his wound that kept him awake. Let's leave it to the heavens. He thought with a bitter smile. While he was in a daze, a figure with a warm peach blossom fragrance appeared in front of him. Long Xiao struggled to open his eyes and saw that the person who had left was half squatting down, holding something in his hand. Consider yourself lucky. This one is in a good mood today, so I'll save your life. A cold female voice sounded in his ears. Chapter 1260. The peach blossom scent of the person beside him smelled very good, like the sunlight of spring shining on his body. A pair of hands tugged at his hands, as if trying to get him to let go of them. The temperature of that hand was very comfortable for him who was currently burning up. Long Xiao obediently let go of the lapel and held the hand tightly instead. So comfortable. After being grabbed by someone, he didn't want to let go for the rest of his life. This was his last thought before his consciousness fell into complete darkness. Gu Xingyin helplessly looked at this person tightly holding her hand. How was she going to apply medicine like this? This person's grip was very tight. When she finally pulled his hand away, she found that the back of her hand was bruised. Gu Xingyin. Eldest Princess Yongla's skin was indeed very delicate. She helped Long Xiao get rid of the wet clothes on his body and cleaned his wounds. Finally, she finished applying medicine for him. Gu Xingyin was already covered in sweat. There was no other way. This body was a typical pampered one. It had probably never done something so tiring in its life. Looking at the pale man on the bed, Gu Xingyin frowned. In the end, she returned to her room. It had been a long time since Long Xiao had a good sleep like this. When he woke up and felt the unfamiliar surroundings, his heart skipped a beat. Then he suddenly remembered what happened last night. As expected. He calmed down and looked around. He was lying on a soft bed that was enough for several people to lie down side by side. Not far away, there was a hot pool. There was a bright light coming in from the outside, showing that it was getting late. There was a cool feeling coming from his wounds, showing that someone had applied medicine. Eldest Princess Yongla probably didn't want people to know that there was a stranger in her bath, so it was obvious who had applied medicine. The image of the other side looking at him with a look of disdain appeared in his mind. Long Zhao's lips couldn't help curling into a smile. When Gu Xingyin entered the hall, she saw his smile. It had to be said that this man's appearance was really good. If a young lady was here and saw a handsome man smiling under the sunlight, she would probably be moved. Of course, she wouldn't fall for him. Her heart had always been with him from the beginning to the end. But on the surface, she snorted coldly and said with the usual arrogance of eldest Princess Yongla, "Awake? You're just lucky that this consort was in a good mood and saved your life." No matter what your identity is, you just need to remember that your life belongs to this consort from now on. After saying that, she did not get a response. She could not help but frown and look at Long Xiao. In the end, the other party was looking at him in shock. Long Xiao was really shocked. Last night, firstly, the lighting was not good, and secondly, Gu Xingyin had just finished bathing, so there were no decorations on her body. Long Xiao looked at her and felt that she was indeed a rare beauty. But today was different. As eldest Princess Yongla, Su Baochan's clothes were all exquisite and luxurious. She had always been fond of gorgeous decorations, and she was able to suppress her aura and appearance. Naturally, she would never let herself be wronged in these matters. A woman's beauty had always been 7 parts color and 3 parts dressing. But Su Baochan herself was 12 parts color, and in addition, her dressing was considered top-notch in the entire Qin kingdom. The beauty was like jade. When she smiled, looked back, or raised her eyebrows, she had endless elegance and an endless mellow fragrance. Long Xiao felt that he was drunk in the mellow fragrance. He didn't want to wake up. Chapter 1261. Then, he met Gu Xingyin's somewhat unhappy gaze. Realizing that it was very impolite to look at a noble lady like this without any scruples, Long Xiao lowered his eyes slightly. Your Highness the eldest princess is so beautiful that I forgot myself for a moment. I hope that your Highness the eldest princess will forgive me. Any woman would be very happy to hear compliments about her appearance. Especially when this praise came from an extraordinarily handsome man. Sure enough, Gu Xingyin's expression became slightly better after hearing this, but she still did not reveal a smile. She glanced at Long Xiao and walked over to sit down on her own. Did you hear what this consort said just now? Long Xiao blinked and said, Your Highness the eldest princess has saved my life. I will remember this in my heart. Gu Xingyin chuckled after hearing this. That's it? Just a word of thanks. Did he really think that Gu Xingyin's favor was so cheap? Long Xiao heard this mocking chuckle, but he was not ashamed at all. Instead, he looked at Gu Xingyin with a serious expression. I can't repay you for saving my life, but I'm willing to repay you with my body. His words were sonorous and powerful, and he was incomparably sincere. Gu Xingyin, how could there be such a shameless person in this world? She saved his life, but she had to repay him with her body. Wishful thinking. She sneered and looked at Long Xiao up and down a few times. What's your name? Long Xiao replied, This one is Xiao Xiao. Gu Xingyin frowned. What a mouthful. Long Xiao was helpless. He just subconsciously gave himself the surname of his mother's family, but he did not expect it to be so strange when read together. However, Gu Xingyin did not dwell on this and said, It's fine. Although your body doesn't seem to be worth much, I guess you can't give anything better in return. Before Long Xiao could react, he heard Gu Xingyin say, You can stay in my palace and be a servant who raises peach blossoms. It's quite pleasing to the eye. Long Xiao was startled. He did not expect that the other party would interpret giving herself to him as such. He thought for a moment. Before his injuries were healed, staying in the palace was indeed the safest option. Gu Xingyin brought the person in front of the steward of the palace and pointed at Long Xiao. This person is Xiao Xiao, my new servant. In the future, I'll let him serve my babies. Treasures were naturally referring to peach blossoms. Long Xiao thought to himself, It's true that eldest Princess Yongla loves peach blossoms. The steward glanced at Long Xiao. He did not understand why such an extraordinary person would become a manservant. However, he did not dare to disobey Her Highness the eldest princess's orders. He quickly accepted the order and brought Long Xiao away. When the two figures were out of sight, Gu Xingyin took out a strangely shaped flute from her sleeve and blew it gently. There was no sound, but a black-clothed figure quickly appeared on the ground. Ani greets mistress. Gu Xingyin's voice was cold. During this period of time, watch this palace for me. If anyone suspicious approaches the palace, kill them without mercy." The secret guard leader's heart trembled. He did not know why the usually gentle eldest princess would suddenly give such an order. However, he could not ask about mistress's matters. He only needed to do what mistress ordered. Yes. His figure flashed, and the area lost track of him once again. Gu Xingyin thought for a moment and put the flute to her lips again. Chapter 1262. This time, the way she played was a little different from before. There was still no sound. This time, a grey figure appeared in front of her. "Yi greets mistress." The hidden guards and shadow guards were the two teams in charge of eldest Princess Yongl's safety. Yi and Yi were the captains of the two teams and were also the strongest of the two teams. The hidden guards were in charge of killing, while Yi was in charge of gathering information and disguising. As a substitute, Qi was obviously a shadow guard. Yi, from now on, closely monitor Qi's whereabouts. If you find anything unusual, report it to me immediately. Also, don't let Qi protect me alone at any time. She directly said. Yi's body shook. Mistress's words clearly meant that she suspected Qi of having second thoughts. Yes. As shadow guards, they only needed to follow mistress's orders. As for thinking, that was something for the retainers to do. It had nothing to do with them. Gu Xingyin slowly walked through the peach forest. The thousands of peach trees here had been planted for her by her father when he was still alive. They had been here for many years. Every spring, the peach blossoms would bloom. The scenery was too beautiful to behold. When the spring wind blew, countless pink and white petals fell from the sky, landing on her hair, her clothes, and her long robe that hung on the ground. Long Xiao, who was learning how to catch insects and deal with spoiled peach blossoms under the guidance of another servant, was listening attentively to something that was very new to him. When he inadvertently raised his head, he saw such a beautiful scene that he couldn't bear to look away. Gu Xingyin, who was wandering in the sea of peach blossoms, was simply like a fairy among the flowers. Even Long Xiao couldn't help but think, with such beauty and love for peach blossoms, could it be that eldest Princess Yongle was really a peach blossom fairy in her previous life? "What are you looking at?" The servant pulled him hard. Long Xiao turned his head and saw the servant looking at him nervously. Seeing Long Xiao looking at him with some confusion, the servant anxiously said, "Do you want to die?" "Her Highness the eldest princess, is that something people like you and me can look straight at?" Fortunately, no one saw it this time. "Otherwise, be careful of your eyes." Long Xiao rubbed his nose and thought to himself, not only did I stare at her seriously, I even hugged her and kissed her. His eyes darkened as he recalled the wonderful sensation on the tip of his tongue that night. Seeing him remain silent, the waiter became anxious. "Let me tell you, the eldest princess is a celestial being. She is not someone people like us can covet. Don't have any thoughts that you shouldn't have. But, my heart has already been moved by her for a long time." Long Xiao sighed inwardly. He also knew that this shop assistant was worried about him. He could not help but smile and say, "Don't worry, I know my limits." Seeing him like this, the shop assistant was relieved. What he didn't know was that his careless concern would earn him a bright future in the future. Qi was currently in his room. Her room was decorated very luxuriously. From the outside, it looked exactly the same as Gu Xingyin's bedroom. Of course, it only looked the same. After all, there were many things in eldest Princess Yongle's palace that were unique in the entire Qin kingdom. Qi knew that many of his colleagues were secretly envious of him. Chapter 1263. That's right. In their eyes, she didn't need to carry out dangerous missions like them. Every day, she would be like a real noble lady, learning etiquette, eating the best food, and using the most exquisite things. Even if her food and clothing couldn't compare to the real eldest Princess Yongle, it was still better than most noble ladies. After all, sometimes she had to replace eldest Princess Yongle to go out, so her vision couldn't be low. A person's horizons were cultivated through experience, knowledge, fine clothes, and good food. That was why her colleagues envied her. There were even many people who knew that being a substitute would affect their lifespan, but they were still willing to be this kind of person. To be honest, Chi used to think that he was quite lucky. These shadow guards were all children of poor families who couldn't afford to raise them. They lived in broken temples, begged on the streets, and lived a life without dignity. The imperial family took them back. They received delicious food, learned powerful martial arts, and even learned various magical skills. The only price they paid was freedom. Freedom didn't belong to them anymore. Even their lives didn't belong to them. But what did that count for? People like them didn't know how long they could live. Chi was better off than them. As a substitute, it wasn't uncommon for them to die in place of their master, but most of them died of old age. After all, the imperial family had so many people protecting them, so it was very difficult to assassinate them. Chi didn't know when he started to be dissatisfied with the status quo. Perhaps it was when she was hiding in the dark and watching her master being surrounded by the crowd. Perhaps it was when he looked at himself in the mirror when there was no one around, looking at the peerless beauty in the mirror. Or perhaps it was when he saw his master throw away a piece of jewelry that he liked for a long time without any care. That's right, she was just a fake. So the best things, all the glory, all belonged to the real eldest Princess Yongle. She could only hide in a dark corner, holding on to things that she didn't want, and would never be able to walk in front of others. A beautiful cage. This was the best interpretation of her situation. When her master asked if she was willing to leave, she thought about it and refused. She couldn't bear to. She had been pampered and couldn't bear the hardships of an ordinary life. Chi couldn't imagine a life without beautiful jewelry and maids to serve her. But she couldn't accept it. She could have led a better life. The fake did not have a good life because the real owner was there. The more glorious eldest Princess Yongle was, the more unwilling she was. What if the genuine product was no longer around? She was eldest Princess Yongle's only substitute and the person who understood her the most in this world. She could perfectly imitate her movements, her bearing, and even her voice. She was confident that as long as she was careful, she could perfectly replace the real eldest Princess Yongle. As long as she was given a chance. Thinking of the future, Chi's whole body trembled with excitement. She wanted to become the true eldest Princess Yongle, the most respected woman in the entire Qin kingdom. Chi showed a perfect smile to the mirror and then beckoned the maidservant to come in and remove her hairpin. She didn't know that in the dark, there were two pairs of eyes silently watching her. Chapter 1264. Chi thought she had concealed it well. If no one suspected her, perhaps she really could have deceived everyone. But once a person had ambitions, no matter how well they concealed it, under the scrutiny of others, there would always be a trace of it left behind. A shadow guard and a shadow guard who were ordered to monitor Chi, after a few days of observation, finally came to a conclusion that made them break out in cold sweat. Chi was actually delusional, they didn't even dare think about it. What was Chi still not satisfied with that she would have such rebellious thoughts? The two didn't dare conceal anything and reported their observations to Gu Xingyin when they met with Gu Xingyin. The shadow guards and shadow guards had never interacted with each other. Both sides knew of the existence of such a team, but they had never communicated with each other. Both of their reports were the same. Gu Xingyin's lips curled into a smile and ordered them to continue monitoring Chi. Master, I don't understand. In the empty room, a puzzled voice suddenly sounded. It was an E. An E was responsible for protecting eldest Princess Yongle. Unless Gu Xingyin gave the order that he was not needed, he would always secretly guard by her side. When the two men came to report, Gu Xingyin didn't let him leave, which meant he knew about this matter. "What don't you understand?" Gu Xingyin asked. An Yi didn't show himself. If someone who didn't know saw this, they would think she was talking to herself. An Yi's calm voice sounded in the darkness, "Ing Qi is disloyal and even has thoughts of rebellion. Why didn't Master kill her?" This was something An Yi couldn't understand. In the knowledge of the shadow guards, when they found a suspicious and dangerous person, the fastest and most effective way to deal with them was to kill them. No matter what the other party was, a dead person could never threaten Master. What's more, Ing Qi was Master's shadow guard. If Master wanted her life, there was no need to find a reason. The life of a shadow guard belonged to Master. Moreover, according to Ing Qi's understanding of his mistress, eldest Princess Yongla Su Baochan was not someone who would indulge her enemies. Gu Xingyin raised his hand to cover his mouth and yawned. He lazily said, "An Yi, for many people, in this world, there are far more terrifying things than death." An Yi's mind trembled. His eagle-like eyes fell on the beautiful woman in the room, and a chill emerged from the bottom of his heart. This chill wasn't for himself, but for Ing Qi, who still didn't know his fate. Although his master was usually arrogant and willful, compared to the other tyrannical and bloodthirsty members of the royal family, he was already extremely benevolent. It seemed that this time, Ing Qi had really annoyed Master. "I'm going to rest," Gu Xingyin said faintly. The room quieted down. Long Shao had already stayed in this palace for 5 days. The wounds on his body had already begun to heal. He didn't know what medicine Gu Xingyin gave him, but the effect was even better than the healing medicine he carried with him. He stood under the peach blossom tree and looked in the distance. As if peeking through the obstacles of layers of pavilions, he accurately saw the woman in the most exquisite palace. It was time for him to go. Although he was very reluctant, he had to leave. Time waits for no one on Sky Dragon's side. He had to hurry back before those people announced the death of the new emperor. Chapter 1265. Long Shao lowered his eyes and stood under the peach blossom tree. 5 days was enough for him to learn a lot of things about eldest Princess Yongla. For example, she loved peach blossoms and even hired a famous craftsman to think of ways to make her palace have peach blossoms blooming all year round. For example, she never got tired of eating and didn't get tired of eating. Her clothing, food, shelter, and transportation were all top-notch. She couldn't bear the slightest bit of neglect. For example, eldest Princess Yongla loved to be beautiful. Her jewelry and clothes, unless it was her favorite, she never wore the same thing. Long Shao frowned and thought for a moment. The climate in Tianlong was much drier than Daqing. It wasn't suitable for such delicate peach blossoms to grow. It seemed that after he went back this time, he had to send people to study how to plant peach blossoms. As for other aspects, he could naturally let her enjoy the best. Collecting his chaotic thoughts, Long Shao had already made a decision. It was night. A slight sound suddenly came from Gu Xingyin's bedroom. In the next moment, the sound of 2 people fighting could be heard. "Stop!" Gu Xingyin's cold voice came from the curtain. She was still asleep when she was woken up by the system, saying that Long Shao had come. An Yi had always been in charge of her safety in the dark. As a result, the two of them naturally fought at the first moment. However, when her voice came out, the two of them obediently stopped. "An Yi, you go out," Gu Xingyin directly ordered. An Yi was a bit anxious. "Master, this person was very strong. In the short fight just now, even he didn't have the slightest confidence in keeping the other party. How could he be at ease leaving his master alone with this mysterious person in this hall? Go out." Gu Xingyin's voice turned cold. For a shadow guard, the master's order was above everything. Annie sighed and retreated. Gu Xingyin opened the curtain in her undergarment. What are you doing here? She looked at Long Xiao without any surprise in her eyes. This made Long Xiao surprised. You knew I would come. Gu Xingyin shook her head. Long Xiao asked, then why are you so calm, as if you knew I would come? Gu Xingyin glanced at him. Either answer my question, or I'll get someone to escort you out. Long Xiao smiled bitterly. Okay. I'll tell you. His expression became serious, and he said to Gu Xingyin very seriously, I'm here to say goodbye to you. Oh. Gu Xingyin responded faintly, as if she did not care about this matter. Long Xiao suddenly felt suffocated. This woman, no matter if it was the first time they met or until now, she was always high and mighty and didn't care about him at all. Yes, she didn't care about him. Therefore, she didn't care about his identity at all. She didn't care whether he would stay or leave. She didn't even care if they would have the chance to meet again. Gu Xingyin felt her body being tightly pressed against by a fiery body. In the next moment, a voice that sounded like it was gnashing teeth sounded in her ears, Your Highness, in your eyes, what am I? Long Xiao was truly depressed. Since he was born, he had always been high and mighty, making people look up to him. There had never been a woman that could completely ignore him like this. Gu Xingyin impatiently struggled, but she found that she couldn't break free. She could only say, let go first. Long Xiao pretended not to hear anything. Gu Xingyin gave a cold smile, either scram from behind me, or I'll have you thrown out. Chapter 1266. Long Xiao suddenly let out a low laugh. Your Highness, you only know how to threaten me with this move. Long Xiao turned his head and faced Gu Xingyin's flawless face. Even if your Highness doesn't mind, I'm not willing to let anyone see your Highness in your undergarments. Then Gu Xingyin found that she couldn't speak. This person had actually hit her mute acupuncture point. Forget it, I don't need your Highness to reply. Long Xiao gave a self-deprecating laugh, whatever comes from your Highness' beautiful little mouth, it won't be anything good. He tightly hugged the woman in front of him and his eyes revealed a rare gentleness. It was a pity that Gu Xingyin couldn't see it. Then your Highness can slowly listen to me. My heart is in love with your Highness. Long Xiao didn't seem to think that his words were earth-shattering at all. He also saw that Gu Xingyin's ears had turned red from her emotions. Truly beautiful, he thought. I'm actually not called Xiao Xiao, but I can't tell your Highness my real name right now. I swear that there will be a day when I will personally stand in front of you and tell you my name. Bao Chan. I've wanted to call you that for a long time. Gu Xingyin felt something cold being placed on her chest. This is a gift my father gave me when I was born. Please take good care of it. Long Xiao looked at the silent girl in front of him and secretly let out a sigh. He lowered his head and kissed her earlobe. I'm leaving. Gu Xingyin felt the embrace loosen and then the room became silent. Gu Xingyin, she turned around and found that there was no one behind her. Bastard, can't you release my mute acupuncture point before you leave? Gu Xingyin lowered her head and took the jade pendant hanging on her chest. The jade pendant was warm to the touch, and there wasn't a single flaw on the white jade. It was obviously an extremely rare treasure. The front of the jade pendant was engraved with an ancient character, Xiao. The person who carved it was obviously a master as well. His handwriting was neat and contained a murderous aura. Gu Xingyin gently rubbed her finger on the jade pendant. She opened her mouth and found that she could speak. Idiot. Her low voice echoed in the darkness. The next day, a steward came to report that the manservant in charge of serving the peach blossoms had disappeared. If it was just an ordinary servant, the steward naturally wouldn't bother Gu Xingyin. The key point was that this manservant was personally brought here by the eldest princess, and no matter how one looked at him, he didn't look like an ordinary person. That was why the steward came to report. "It's fine. I told him to leave," Gu Xingyin said. Only then did the steward relax. Since that was the case, it had nothing to do with him. After staying in the palace for a long time, the Empress Dowager in the palace missed her daughter and had sent people to urge her to return twice. "We'll set out for the palace tomorrow," Gu Xingyin said to the maidservant beside her. Thinking about it, she summoned Ing Yi, telling Qi to stay in the palace. "There's no need for her to come back with me." "Yes." Ing Qi heard this order and was stunned for a moment before quickly saying, "A stand-in's task is to follow master, how can I be too far away from master?" "Ing Qi." Ing Yi's cold voice pulled Ing Qi back to her senses. "Do you not listen to master's words?" Chapter 1267. Ing Qi bowed her head in horror. Subordinate doesn't dare. Yes, she had been a little carried away these past few days. How could she forget? No matter how much she looked like her master, she was just a substitute. Her master didn't need her to follow, so she could only stay here obediently. Ing Qi bit her lip and lowered her head deeply, concealing the unwillingness in her eyes. She once again strongly realized that no matter how glorious her appearance was, in the eyes of all those who knew, she was still just a pitiful substitute. The restless thoughts in his heart swelled even more. Ing Yi saw her like this and frowned slightly. He calmly took out a small porcelain bottle and handed it to her. "This is your medicine for this month." Ing Qi's eyes lit up when she saw this and she accepted it with thanks. After Ing Yi left, Ing Qi quickly walked over to the mirror, somewhat impatiently opened the cork, and swallowed the white jade pill inside. Then, she quietly sat in front of the mirror and began to admire her unparalleled beauty. The person in the mirror had a flawless face, a bit more and a bit less. Ing Qi couldn't help raising her hand and gently stroking it. This was her face. After being eldest Princess Yongla's shadow for 7 years, she had long forgotten what she looked like. Her impression of herself was just like this. Ing Qi's eyes gradually became infatuated. Which woman didn't love beauty? What's more, she was such a beautiful woman. Her eyes moved down and saw the bottle in her hand. The white medicine inside was an important reason why she had been able to maintain the same appearance as eldest Princess Yongla for so many years. She had secretly found someone to analyze the ingredients in this pill, wanting to make it herself. Unfortunately, no matter how powerful or famous the doctor she found was, they couldn't completely distinguish how many herbs were contained in this small white jade pill. It seemed that she could only find an opportunity to start with her master. As long as she knew where the antidote to control the shadow guards was and where the pill she had taken was. Her master was of no use. She, Ing Qi, would definitely play this role for the rest of her life. In Gu Xingyin's bedroom. She was lazily sitting in front of the dressing table, letting her trusted maid comb her hair. Her fingertips were holding a small and delicate white jade bottle, gently spinning it. If Ing Qi was here, she would find that in the small bottle in Gu Xingyin's hand was the white jade pill she had to take every month. Gu Xingyin gently removed the cork and poured out a jade bead-like pill. "Qinghua, what do you think will happen if this pill is taken for a few years and suddenly?" Qinhua's expression did not change. She deftly tied Gu Xingyin's hair into an exquisite bun before replying, "I know. If you stop taking it and at the same time don't use another pill, your face will be ruined. No one would know that the ordinary maid who always followed eldest Princess Yongla was the last disciple of the famous ghost doctor in Qin Kingdom." Gu Xingyin gently threw the pill in her hand into the tea in front of her. The pill melted in the tea and no trace could be seen. "Pour it out." Chapter 1268. Princess Royal Yongla returned to the palace with her entourage. There would never be a lack of banquets in the bustling capital. Any family with a bit of status would not forget to invite this honorable eldest princess. It was her freedom to decide whether she wanted to come or not. But if she didn't send the invitation, she wouldn't be giving face to Princess Royal. If she didn't give face to Princess Royal, the Emperor and Empress Dowager wouldn't give face to her either. Your Highness. Qinghua came in with a few exquisite invitations in her hands. Gu Xingyi knew that Qinghua was very considerate. These invitations must have been selected by her and she couldn't make the decision. She reached out and took them. Prince Yu was marrying his second wife, Duke Wei was celebrating his 60th birthday, and Princess Duanyan was getting married. Prince Yu was her half-brother. Princess Duanyan passed away 2 years ago. Now that he was remarrying, as his younger sister, she should go and take a look. Duke Wei was from the Empress Dowager's maternal family. Duke Wei was the Empress Dowager's biological brother and Su Baochan's biological uncle. Su Baochan had always been close to her maternal family, so she definitely had to go. As for Princess Duanyan, she was the Empress's daughter and she was going to marry the left Prime Minister's eldest son. She was going to get married next month, so she had to give face to the Empress. Fortunately, these three families were all on different dates, so it wouldn't be difficult. Qinghua, go and prepare 3 generous gifts. I remember that there is a pair of white jade vases made of exquisite deep-sea jade in the storeroom. Put them together with the gifts from Duke Wei's mansion. This sentence was enough to show which was more important in Princess Royal Yonla's eyes. Qinghua left without any change in her expression. This was what Gu Xingyin liked the most about Qinghua. She was able to complete any task he gave her perfectly and knew her identity. She would never ask about things that she shouldn't ask about or things that didn't belong to her. The birthday banquet of Duke Wei's mansion was approaching. Gu Xingyin woke up early and left the palace after greeting the Empress Dowager. Gu Xingyin sat in the carriage. In her mind, she still remembered how the Empress Dowager had taken her hand and asked her to greet her uncle properly. Everyone knew that the nobles of the Dao Palace enjoyed limitless glory, but how could they know that she couldn't even take a look at her own brother's birthday? The luxurious 8 treasures jade carton stopped in front of the gate of Duke Wei Mansion. Right now was the time when Duke Wei's mansion was at its most lively. Guests were walking in and out of the place, and the place that was supposed to be bustling with noise and excitement had quieted down because of the arrival of this carriage. Everyone in the capital knew that there was only one person who dared to be so flamboyant in the capital. The eldest princess of Yonla, Su Baochan, had been spoiled by the 2 most powerful people in the Qin kingdom. The wife of the heir of Duke Wei's mansion personally led a group of sisters-in-law to welcome them. Gu Xingyin stepped down from the carriage and was very satisfied to receive the astonished gazes of the crowd. Greetings to your highness the eldest princess. The woman who was nearing 40 years old was obviously very happy to see Gu Xingyin, but she still bowed to her. Gu Xingyin quickly stepped forward and supported her kneeling body. There is no need for the wife of the heir to be so courteous. She personally held the wife of the heir of Duke Wei's hand and walked inside. When the 2 entered the door hand in hand, Gu Xingyin blinked her eyes and softly called her cousin-in-law. The wife of the heir of Duke Wei also smiled. Father and mother both said that you would definitely come. They have been waiting for you for a long time. The people around them couldn't hear what the 2 were talking about. They could only watch as Gu Xingyin and the wife of the heir of Duke Wei chatted intimately as if there was no one around. Everyone was envious of Duke Wei's mansion's good fortune. Chapter 1269. Wasn't this good fortune? The Empress Dowager's maiden family and the Emperor's maternal family. As long as Duke Wei family didn't seek death, no one could take away their honor and favor. When Gu Xingyin arrived at the main hall, she immediately saw the old man sitting on the main seat, wearing a festive red pomegranate robe. Duke Wei happened to be celebrating his 60th birthday today. His complexion looked very good and his spirit was hale and hearty. His face glowed as the guests congratulated him. Gu Xingyin gave Duke Wei a junior's greeting and said, "Niece Yongla wishes uncle good fortune as long as the East Sea and longevity as long as the South Mountain." Duke Wei looked at his niece and his expression became even more joyful. Yongla gave him a junior's greeting and called herself his niece. This was clearly telling others that she had a close relationship with Duke Wei family. Most of the time, the eldest princess's intentions represented the emperor's intentions. If the emperor didn't like his maternal family, would the eldest princess say such words so openly? She was a female after all. After Gu Xingyin gave her birthday gift, she went to the rear courtyard. Naturally, there was another round of greetings in the rear courtyard. Fortunately, Gu Xingyin had a noble status. It was others who tried to curry favor with her. She didn't need to do anything herself. After sitting for a while, Gu Xingyin felt that it was meaningless and found an excuse to leave. She couldn't go back. If she left now, she didn't know what rumors would spread outside. Perhaps Duke Wei family would lose the emperor's favor in the future. After thinking for a while, Gu Xingyin led the servant girls behind her to the rear garden. Duke Wei family's Zhou family was a large family with hundreds of years of history. Although the rear garden wasn't as grand as the imperial garden, it was still a unique scenery. As he watched, Gu Xingyin's interest was piqued. "Qinghua, go get me a jug of fruit wine." Fruit wine wasn't intoxicating, so she didn't need to worry about losing her composure after drinking. Qinghua nodded. Seeing that Gu Xingyin was accompanied by a few palace maids, she left at ease. However, before Gu Xingyin could wait for Qinghua to return, she heard a pleasantly surprised voice. "Your Highness the eldest princess." Gu Xingyin frowned. Who was making a fuss? She turned around and saw a young master wearing a blue robe looking at her with a pleasantly surprised expression. Gu Xingyin glanced at him indifferently. A palace maid behind her stepped forward and reprimanded, "How dare you?" Shouting in front of the eldest princess, how could he be so rude? "Why aren't you greeting the princess royal? Which family's young master are you?" Hearing this, the blue-robed young master's face. He obediently knelt down to greet her, but his heart was filled with doubt. Why was the eldest princess so different from last time? Last time, princesses TSS had. He felt, he was very unreconciled his heart best. Comsas's, does the eldest princess's eldest princesses? Yours still remember this remember this as. How could Gu Xingyin recognize him? She had looked through Su Baochan's memories, but she didn't have any impression of this person. But looking at Zhang Shu's appearance, he clearly knew eldest Princess Yongla. Gu Xingyin carefully thought about it and had an answer in her heart. He must have seen that eldest Princess Yongla before, right? So it's the Zhang family's young master. "You can rise," she calmly said. Zhang Shu saw that she seemed to remember his appearance and his heart filled with joy. He quickly stood up. He saw Gu Xingyin sitting alone in the pavilion and wanted to walk over. Chapter 1270. Impudent. This time, without Gu Xingyin's hint, the palace maid beside her stood up and reprimanded him angrily. What was the matter with the son of the Supreme Court official? Did he not know the rules? Did he not see the eldest princess admiring the flowers? Zhang Shu's expression was a bit awkward. He did not expect the palace maid to treat him like this. He subconsciously looked at Gu Xingyin. She was still looking at her hands indifferently and did not look at him. Although the Supreme Court official was not a high position, Uncle Zhang was still doted on by his parents. When had he ever been reprimanded so rudely? Moreover, the person who reprimanded him was just a small palace maid. Zhang Shu had never been treated like this. He wanted to just walk away. However, he remembered a few days ago when he went to Marquis Qingda's manor with a group of young masters. Marquis Qingda treated them differently. Prince Yu's son was the noblest everywhere. As the son of the Supreme Court official, he did not even think highly of a servant. This was the disparity brought about by status. Zhang Shu knew that he did not have much ability. If he relied on himself, he might not even be able to reach his father's rank. Then, if he wanted to be above others, he could only rely on shortcuts. Marriage was the fastest and most effective way. In the entire Duqing dynasty, the noblest unmarried woman was eldest Princess Yongle. If he could gain the favor of eldest Princess Yongle, what Marquis Qingde? He would probably suck up to her. Originally, Zhang Shu did not dare to have any thoughts about eldest Princess Yongle. Who was eldest Princess Yongle? She was the daughter of the Empress Dowager and the only sister of the current emperor. She was born with a golden branch and jade leaves. Although Zhang Shu thought highly of himself, he knew that he and eldest Princess Yongle were people from two different worlds. However, the last time he met her, he saw hope. Last time, at Marquis Xianyin's birthday banquet, he saw the legendary eldest Princess Yongle for the first time. Out of politeness, he went forward to greet her. At that time, because he was nervous, he wrote a poem to praise the eldest princess's beauty. As soon as the poem left his mouth, he regretted it. Because this kind of behavior was too rash, even a noble lady with a slight temper would be angry, let alone the eldest princess. The expression of the palace maid beside Princess Royal changed. When she was about to scold Princess Royal, she heard Princess Royal's laughter. She actually thought that his poem was very good. He even gave him a glass of wine. At that time, he felt it was a bit strange, but when he saw the eldest princess smile like a flower while being praised by a group of young masters, he felt like he understood something. The eldest princess liked others praising her. He felt that he had grasped the trick to pleasing the eldest princess, so he took the opportunity to approach the eldest princess. He wanted to praise her unparalleled beauty, but he quickly made her giggle. At that time, Zhang Shu still felt that the noble eldest princess was just a vulgar woman. But after that, he never had the chance to see eldest Princess Yongle again. It was only today that they met again in the garden of Duke Wei's mansion. Gu Xingyin also asked the system to check what had happened in his mind. Her expression became extremely unsightly. This Ying Qi was really good. He would deal with her sooner or later. But right now, she had to solve the problem in front of her first. Zhang Shu ignored the palace maid's angry glare and took a step forward. He looked at Gu Xingyin affectionately. "Your Highness the eldest princess is peerless and this servant has admired you for a long time. I wonder if I would be lucky enough to get drunk with your Highness the eldest princess." Yin expressed, "I won't take the blame for Ying Qi. This is 7, there will be more updates before 12. I'll try my best to write 3 more updates. Moi 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 moi." Chapter 1271. Impudent. As soon as he said this, it wasn't just the maid who had reprimanded him. The 6 maids guarding Gu Xingyin all took a step forward and angrily reprimanded him. They were truly angry. They had never seen someone who dared to be so impudent in front of the eldest princess. The 6 maids, even if their voices were clear, their aura was still very oppressive when they reprimanded him in unison. At least for a pampered young master like Zhang Shu, he was so scared that he took a step back. These maids looked at him with even more disdain. He could be scared to this extent by a few maids and he dared to covet their eldest princess. When Zhang Shu retreated like this, he also felt a bit ashamed. His face was a bit red as he looked at Gu Xingyin's face. "Your Highness, Princess Royal, is your servant always this rude?" Gu Xingyin finally spoke. Finally, her eyes fell on Zhang Shu for the first time in a long time. Zhang Shu couldn't help sticking out his chest. However, Gu Xingyin's next words made him feel like he had fallen into an ice cave. "Where did everyone go? Are you going to let this thing spoil my mood?" "Your Highness, eldest princess." Zhang Shu looked at Gu Xingyin's cold expression in disbelief. He could clearly see that the other side was looking at him like she was looking at a disgusting ant. He no longer had a chance to say the rest of his words. Because some guards had appeared out of nowhere and blocked his mouth, nose, lips, and tongue. They completely ignored his struggles and dragged him away. Gu Xingyin didn't know how they would deal with Zhang Shu, but his end wouldn't be good. Although he dared to be so bold, it was also because of Ying Qi's indulgence. But the most important thing was that this man thought too highly of himself. He didn't put the dignity of the eldest princess in his heart. Serves him right. As for Ying Qi, Gu Xingyin's lips curled into a cold smile. Initially, Gu Xingyin wanted to take it slow and let her feel the feeling of losing everything bit by bit. But now, Gu Xingyin's heart was burning with anger. Her previous method might have been too gentle for this woman. When Qinghua came up with a cup of warm fruit wine, she noticed that the atmosphere in the pavilion was somewhat gloomy. She looked straight ahead and walked to Gu Xingyin's side. "Your Highness Princess Royal, this is the treasure that Madame Duke Wei specially brought out when she heard that you were going to drink." At this time, how could Gu Xingyin have the mood to drink? She tasted at least a little and put it down. The wine was good wine. However, for a person like her, she had seen many of the best wines in the world. What elder Princess Yongla was drinking was her mood. By the time Gu Xingyin's carriage returned to the palace, Duke Wei had also learned about what happened in the back garden from his subordinates. His expression was cold as he ordered his men to leave. The people of the Zhang family didn't know what was good for them. A few days later, Duke Wei impeached Lord Zhang of the Supreme Court for not strictly investigating the case, forcing a good woman to die, accepting bribes, and 6 other crimes. The court was in an uproar. However, the emperor didn't order a strict investigation and ordered the Supreme Court to throw away his official post. Those who were quick-witted knew that the emperor was dissatisfied with Lord Zhang. Those who were more informed knew that on the day of Duke Wei's birthday, the second young master of the Zhang family was carried out. It was said that he had offended Princess Royal Yongla. Chapter 1272. Those who knew what was going on shook their heads. This Zhang family's second young master, of all people he could provoke, why did he have to provoke eldest Princess Yongla? What kind of person was the eldest princess? Was she someone he, the young master of the Supreme Court, could afford to provoke? What the people outside thought, Gu Xingyin didn't care. No matter how complicated these people's hearts were, they still had to bow to him with a respectful smile on their faces. Gu Xingyin returned to her palace. That night, someone brought Ying Qi, who was still in her palace, over. Ying Qi greets master. Ying Qi felt a little nervous. She didn't know why her master had called her over in the middle of the night. She had previously tried to ask the shadow guard who brought her over, but had failed. The first rule of the shadow guards was to keep their mouths shut. Gu Xingyin looked at the person on the ground faintly. Her palace was inlaid with night pearls, so if she didn't use a special gauze cover, the night would still be as bright as day. Therefore, she was able to clearly see Ying Qi's appearance. Indeed, they were no different from each other. It was just that seeing the expression of panic on the face that was exactly the same as her own was really a bit uncomfortable. "Kneel." Ying Qi didn't say anything and knelt down towards Gu Xingyin. A jade-white hand lifted her chin, forcing her to raise her head and look at the person above her. Facing the face she had seen countless times, Ying Qi's eyes became a little flustered. She didn't know why her master would suddenly treat her like this. Moreover, in her eyes, there was a trace of jealousy that she didn't even notice. Gu Xingyin also didn't notice it, but this didn't prevent her from guessing Ying Qi's thoughts. A person's desires were nothing more than that. Gu Xingyin took a closer look and released her hand. Then a maidservant beside her handed her a white brocade handkerchief. Ying Qi watched helplessly as Gu Xingyin carefully wiped the hand that had just touched her, as if she had just touched something dirty. Ying Qi's heart filled with infinite resentment. Aren't you the ones who wanted me to become like you? Now, what right did he have to show such a disdainful attitude? No. Ying Qi retracted his thoughts. Although her master was not very close to her, she had never used such a humiliating attitude. What exactly happened? Gu Xingyin didn't bother to observe the changes in her expression. There was no need for her to guess the thoughts of a shadow guard. For example, if a person was bitten by a dog, they wouldn't run to the dog and ask if it didn't like them. Young Master Zhang of the Supreme Court's mansion, young Master Lin of Minister Lin's mansion, and the young Master of Jinglin County Magistrate's mansion. Gu Xingyin said these names one by one, admiring Ying Qi's increasingly pale face. Relying on my identity, I've gotten quite a few female confidants. His last words were extremely cold, causing Ying Qi to shiver involuntarily. Forcing herself to calm down, Ying Qi knelt on the ground and begged for forgiveness. Master, please forgive me. It was Ying Qi who couldn't control herself and was willing to confess, asking for Master's punishment. She knew her master's temper. Since he was willing to admit it, he must have known all the things she had done. Admitting her mistakes with a sincere attitude was far better than gritting her teeth and refusing to admit it. But she had guessed wrong. There were more important things waiting for her. Chapter 1273. Punishment. Gu Xingyin softly muttered these two words. That clear and cold voice was like a small hook, hooking Ying Qi's heart, making it impossible for her to let go. She knelt on the cold white jade floor. The night of early spring still had the lingering chill of winter, and it seeped from her knees to her entire body. She didn't know what kind of situation she would encounter. Rest assured, there will be no shortage of punishment for you. This one sentence completely crushed the last trace of hope in her heart. Ying Qi obediently lay on the floor, waiting for her master to continue with the words she hadn't said before. What I just said is just a small matter. Ying Qi, have I ever treated you well? Gu Xingyin suddenly asked. She seemed to have only thought of this sentence on the spur of the moment, but it made Ying Qi's heart skip a beat. Ying Qi pressed her head against the cold floor and heard her own calm voice. Master's kindness to Ying Qi is as heavy as a mountain. Humph, what a good kindness. Gu Xingyin sneered. Because my kindness to you is as heavy as a mountain, you want to replace me? It was like a bolt from the blue. Ying Qi's whole body shook because of this sentence. She raised her head and stared at Gu Xingyin with her beautiful eyes. She could not hide the panic in her voice as she said, Master, please understand. I would never dare to have such delusions. What glory and wealth, what honor and glory, she couldn't remember anything at this time. The only thing Ying Qi wanted to do at this moment was to eliminate her master's suspicions. If not, she would die. Gu Xingyin closed his eyes. You and I both know very well what thoughts we've had that we shouldn't. Ying Qi, Yonglu, have always treated you well, but I never thought I would raise such a cruel and unscrupulous thing like you. Ying Qi still refused to give up. Did Master hear some gossip from someone's mouth? Ying Qi's sincerity to Master can be witnessed by the heavens and earth. She looked up at Gu Xingyin. When she saw that Gu Xingyin's eyes were still closed and not looking at her, she made up her mind. Master, Ying Qi can swear to heaven. Oh. Gu Xingyin opened her eyes. She was finally moved. Ying Qi grit his teeth and raised 3 fingers on his right hand as he swore, Heavens above, Ying Qi is loyal to my master, eldest Princess Yongla, never disloyal, the heavens and earth can bear witness. If I violate this oath, then call me. She didn't know why, but when she said this, she suddenly had a bad premonition. But Gu Xingyin just looked at her. So what? Ying Qi closed his eyes. If I ever violate this oath, may I, Ying Qi, die a miserable death. I can neither live nor die. This was already an extremely heavy oath. Very good. Gu Xingyin suddenly smiled. She said, "Did you all hear that? What she just said?" In the empty hall, several grey-robed figures suddenly appeared. Gu Xingyin said to the grey-robed figure leading them, "Ying Yi, she is your subordinate. How to deal with her will be up to you." The grey-robed figure silently bowed and two of them sealed Ying Qi's acupoints before she could react. The grey-robed figure was about to leave when Gu Xingyin's cold voice sounded behind him. "Remember, you must act according to what she said herself. The rest of your life will be spent wandering in the wind and rain, and will not end well. I can neither live nor die." Chapter 1274. Ying Qi's struggling movements froze when she heard Gu Xingyin's words. She suddenly raised her head and stared at Gu Xingyin's face. "Her Royal Highness Princess Royal has no intention of letting Ying Qi go." Gu Xingyin gently stroked the white jade cup in her hand and didn't speak. Ying Qi smiled bitterly. "Su Baochan, you're so ruthless. You." Before she could finish her words, a shadow guard who had turned pale with fright sealed her mute acupoint. Then, everyone in the hall knelt down in unison, waiting for their master to speak. These shadow guards hated Ying Qi in their hearts. Ying Qi was a person who deserved to die, yet she had implicated them. What if their master was in a bad mood and decided to vent her anger on them? Gu Xingyin looked at the hall full of people kneeling down and was stunned for a moment, but then thinking of her current identity and the world she lived in, she suddenly understood the thoughts of these shadow guards. In a society where imperial power was supreme, existences like shadow guards had no dignity at all. Their life and death were all controlled by their master. "Get up and take her away," Gu Xingyin said lightly. The shadow guards felt as if they had been granted amnesty. Since master said so, it meant she wouldn't pursue this matter. They quickly took Ying Qi away and disappeared in front of Gu Xingyin. Towards Gu Xingyin, they were grateful, but towards Ying Qi, these shadow guards only felt disgust. It was this woman who had almost caused them to be punished. Thinking so, these shadow guards stared at Ying Qi without any trace of warmth. Didn't their master say they were to properly entertain her according to her oath? It just so happened that these shadow guards were proficient in many ways, but this was a life worse than death. Silence was restored in the hall. Gu Xingyin suddenly felt bored. "System, how is he?" Gu Xingyin suddenly asked. The system flashed a white light and sent a message to Gu Xingyin's mind. Sky Dragon had not been peaceful recently. The late emperor had passed away, and the first prince, who should have rushed back to inherit the throne, met with an accident on his way back. There was no news of him. The other princes in the court, who had been dormant for a long time, seized this opportunity to spread the news that the first prince had died. A group of officials, led by the prime minister, advocated for a new emperor to be chosen from the remaining princes. Fortunately, there was another group of staunch royal officials who insisted on finding the first prince. Both sides refused to budge, and this bought some time for Long Shao. Then, the first prince returned to the capital in a high-profile manner and used thunderous methods to control the chaotic situation in the court, ascending to the throne. Compared to the benevolence and righteousness of the previous emperor, the methods of this new emperor were clearly much more forceful. Not long after he ascended the throne, he took out a handbook in front of the court. On it was a list of the masterminds behind the ambush he encountered on the day he returned to the capital. The second prince, the fourth prince, and the ninth prince were all involved. Long Shao mercilessly stripped the three of their titles and imprisoned them in the imperial mausoleum, never to enter the capital for the rest of their lives. The imperial court had also purged most of the old officials and put the younger officials in important positions. In less than half a year, the entire Sky Dragon court was solemn and the new emperor had complete control of the situation. Some of the old officials who originally had some objections to the new emperor's thunderous methods could not help but sigh at the current situation. They also had to admit that His Majesty was indeed a natural politician. The Sky Dragon Court officials and the people were very satisfied with the new emperor. The only thing they had some complaints about was that the new emperor's style seemed to be a bit extravagant. Chapter 1275. How did this saying come about? It turned out that after the court was stabilized and everything was under his control, the new emperor began to recruit skilled craftsmen in the entire Tianlong dynasty to build a beautiful palace in the harem. As soon as he ascended the throne, he started to build a magnificent palace, which worried many of the ministers. This was not a good sign. How many emperors who had perished were extravagant and ruined the country? Of course, these officials did not dare to say this out loud. They only tactfully advised His Majesty that the previous emperor had always been simple, and His Majesty could follow the previous emperor's style. Long Shao looked at the Minister of Revenue in the court without batting an eyelid. The Minister of Revenue was an old man with a mustache and looked very shrewd. Of course, it was impossible for him to not be shrewd if he could become the Minister of Revenue. The Minister of Revenue was still capable, but he was too stingy. Money was more important than anything else. At that time, the previous emperor thought that it was probably a good idea to let such a person be the Minister of Revenue. It turned out that it was indeed a good idea. After this meticulous Minister of Revenue took office, the treasury became more and more plentiful day by day. Long Shao was very sure of his ability, but sometimes he felt that this old man was really annoying. For example, at this time, the Minister of Revenue had been talking non-stop for the time it took to brew a cup of tea since the start of the morning assembly. The central idea in his words was that he had no money. His Majesty, you need to be thrifty. Feeling the pressure from His Majesty getting lower and lower, many officials silently took a step back to stay away from this brave Minister of Revenue. As the saying goes, a new broom sweeps clean, not to mention that this was the most honorable one in the entire Tianlong dynasty. If he wants to build a palace, just let him do as he pleases. Anyway, Tianlong dynasty was strong and prosperous, and the treasury was abundant. Not to mention building a palace, even building an imperial city would not be a problem. Long Shao listened patiently for a while, and found that if he did not speak, the Minister of Revenue would probably be able to talk for about the time it took to brew a cup of tea. He finally could not help but interrupt him. Minister Qian, I have a few questions to ask, can you answer them? The Minister of Revenue was taken aback. He did not understand what relationship the emperor was trying to sell. He could only bow and say, Your Majesty, please ask. This subject will answer everything I know. Are there any of my people who do not have enough to eat and keep warm? Minister Qian was stunned. His Majesty's benevolence in the sea, the people of Tianlong have nothing to worry about. All right then, let me ask you again. Have I ever collected exorbitant taxes from the people? Minister Qian replied respectfully, His Majesty is benevolent and righteous. Never. Let me ask you again. How much did my national treasury earn last year? Reporting to Your Majesty, Minister Qian almost subconsciously reported a string of numbers. Only after he finished speaking did he realize that something was wrong. He hurriedly looked at His Majesty, who was seated above. Long Shao looked at him with a faint smile. With such a huge income and no large expenditure, Minister Qian, are you telling me that you have no money? Yao Shangshu's legs instantly went soft. He simply couldn't follow up with this. If he dared to say that he had no money, the emperor would issue an edict to confiscate his family's property after the court was dismissed. What happened to all the income from the national treasury last year? Minister Qian looked at His Majesty, who had dug a hole for him to jump into. He wanted to cry but had no tears. Reporting to Your Majesty, this old subject is old. I just miscalculated. Oh, Long Shao suddenly realized. That is to say, you have money, right? Minister Qian nodded with difficulty, you're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.